Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some Path of Exile 2 live stream discussion. Today, we're going to be talking about patch 0.1.1. Now, at the time that I am going live with this patch has been live for approximately 2.5 hours. I think it's worth starting by saying that the world is not on fire. It's not like this has caused tremendous performance issues or anything of the sort, but there have been a couple of significant issues there. The first big issue that's come up is that there is a bug that is affecting warriors with the Shockwave Totem skill. The Shockwave Totem skill was modified so that it would work well in conjunction with Astral Projection Support. However, everyone that's reported running this skill since then that does not use Astral Projection is reporting that it feels absolutely and utterly terrible without Astral Projection Support. So right now, the workaround is that if you're playing a warrior, you must run Astral Projection Support on the relevant totem if you're using it. But I do think this is the sort of thing that's likely to get hotfixed pretty soon. Otherwise, it seems like everything is working pretty smoothly. There have been some people reporting performance improvements, other people reporting performance degradations, and ultimately it's probably going to be somewhere in the middle of that for everyone, but it's going to be better for some, worse for others. Now, if you're watching this while it is live, one thing I will point out is that you do have the flexibility on a YouTube stream to jump around. So if you find that there's a spot that you miss, you can always rewind a little bit, have a look at what was said there. Or alternately, you can jump the stream onto a higher speed if you want to catch up. If you find you're a bit behind, you can always catch up and get to where we're at the moment. If you're watching this after the stream has gone live, it's my intention to keep this up for as long as there's interest in it. But one thing I do want to do is then just sort of go through with a very light editing touch, less than I do at home, and just remove sections that didn't work very well. There are a bunch of little problems there. People are just mentioning in chat that the Atlas seems to be buggy for a number of people. I haven't seen any widespread complaints about that on the Path of Exile 2 subreddit, but who knows, maybe it is the case that there's a bunch of things along those lines. I think that performance issues are the sort of thing that sometimes can be more problematic there. If there's something that's targeting just a small percentage of users, they can be a real problem because they're harder to fix. But if it's something that's widespread, they tend to get fixed a bit quicker. People are commenting that the delirium fog seems to be a bit heavier and that there's, a whole bunch of other issues in there. And Oi there in chat is saying I should change hoodie color regularly during this. Unfortunately, I can't do that on a live stream. That's one of the things that I started doing as a little bit of a joke after people commented on it once when I did it by accident. And now it's, just become this ongoing meme. So let's go through this. These are the patch notes. It's worth noting that there were very, very minimal changes between the patch notes that were announced yesterday and the patch notes that have gone live. And I'm saying yesterday there because in my time zone, it was yesterday. I think it was 5 p.m. that they released the patch notes and then 9 a.m. the patch went live. But obviously there's parts of the world where a 16-hour gap is not yesterday. It's still the same day. So if you're in places that are like GMT -1, -2, and so on, then in that case, when I say yesterday, I actually mean today. So let's go through these things, starting with the endgame changes. Firstly, they have fixed up a bunch of things related to towers. There are 4 new tower map areas. We're going to have to get familiar with these, but all of them seem to be better than the Lost Towers map was. And on top of that, the Lost Towers map has been improved a little bit. It could do with more possibly, but then again, it's not so important now that it's only 20% of our towers rather than 100% of them. So I think that this is just generally a massive win all around here. And of course, there's going to be a couple of little nasty surprises we'll find out in some of these, but all in all, I think it's a big improvement. Now, the Arbiter of Ash fight has been changed substantially. You're going to get the opportunity to respawn in this if you fail it. Now, they mention here you'll have up to 6 respawn attempts. Realistically, you actually have 5. There's 5 respawn attempts, but you get 6 visits into the fight in total. Now, this is something that you only get the 5 respawns or 6 total attempts if you're playing it on the lowest difficulty. The higher the difficulty, the fewer respawn attempts you get. But like they say, by that time, you probably know quite a bit more about it. Now, on top of this, the leaving the map still forfeits the attempt, so you need to fight the boss with the same build that you started the encounter with. Higher difficulties of the boss lower the number of respawn attempts you receive. They did not finish adding this mechanic onto other pinnacle bosses. Now, I did mention in a previous video when they first announced this will have some flow-on effects throughout the League economy. I stand by those predictions. I think we're going to see a decrease in the gap in the cost, but a decrease in the value in Trade League, the value gap between the average outcome of the Arbiter of Ash boss fight on difficulty 0 and the entrance tokens. So Moroya Invictus in particular is likely to go down in value as a result of this, both unidentified versions and also identified versions of with all 21 different versions of it, likely to go down as a result of this. But ultimately, I still think that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad change. We'll just have to see how it plays out. I think this could be quite a bit more significant when it's done for some of the other pinnacle encounters as well, because the Arbiter of Ash being the hardest of these encounters, it's probably the one that the fewest number of people are at the moment, whereas things like Zesh 0, Simulacrum 0, they're just that bit more accessible, and so that's going to be something that'll be interesting to see. Now, the Arbiter of Ash is also losing a couple of shenanigans that players could do in order to trivialize the fight. So you can no longer interrupt during his Falling Flame Seed skill. This is the one where he puts down a marker on the ground that it looks like the correct thing to do is to just run out of a little circle, but actually what you need to do is run into that circle. It's one of those things where the fight has some confusing mechanics that aren't particularly difficult to deal with, but are difficult to work out what to do in. In any case, what you need to do there, you need to drop everything and run into the Falling Flame Seed area so that you are inside the safe zone, the eye of the storm, if you like. His Flaming Gale skill can no longer be blocked. The boss is now invulnerable for longer during its emergence and takes significantly reduced damage while emerging. This is intended to stop people with the most powerful characters in the league from essentially one-shotting the boss. It might not technically be a one-shot, but killing the boss before it does any meaningful skills, that's intended not to be possible, and this is intended to make it less possible. One of the effects that this has, anytime there's something that makes it easier for the very strongest characters to just trivialize a boss, what tends to happen there is that those players monopolize access to that boss. So they'll buy up all of the Citadel keys that are on the market, and they'll just run them really fast, and they'll also pump out all of the loot that drops from that boss. This is something that becomes really apparent in Path of Exile 1, where the Uber Searing Exarch and the Uber Eater of Worlds in particular can be fought extraordinarily fast, like absolutely unbelievably fast in that game. You can literally have people doing 500 of each boss in a day. Or, sorry, 500 of an individual boss in a day. You can't do 500 of each of them, but in an 8-hour period, someone can literally do 500 Searing Exarch, including the Uber version of it. What this means is this hyper-professionalization. People will bulk buy the access keys, they'll sell off the top loot, and they'll just flood the market with the lesser stuff. Is basically the side effects of running it. So, what Grinding Gear Games are doing here is reducing the ability of the most powerful characters to dominate this fight, meaning that the mechanics are going to be more important. I really need to play this, though, to get any more of a sense as to exactly how it's going to go. Next, there's a whole bunch of changes to the number of monsters that are on maps. Well, that's sort of going to start, but there's a couple of quick things about Citadels and quality of life things first. Then we'll come back to the rare monsters thing. So Citadels can now appear closer to the Ziggurat Refuge. This is something that just means that it's a little bit quicker to find a Citadel early on. And then Citadels are more visible. So this is things that change the Arbiter of Ash's precursor bosses, the ones that are based on the 3 axe zones. Maps now display their biome when they're hovered in the Atlas UI. This is something that's important in conjunction with one particular notable on the Atlas tree. That notable causes you to be able to sort of target farm a particular type of reward. So for instance, one of the things that it does is it ups the drop rate of Djinn barriers and also Trials of Chaos entrance tokens by 40% if you're fighting on the right type of terrain. This is something that I think matters more in solo self-found, but it's definitely a welcome little change to have there. Also, one of the particular biomes is 40% currency as well. So like there's to certain currency as well. So that's a big deal. Having that biome a little bit clearer is an improvement. Now we have a number of changes to map bosses and also to just map population in general. So firstly, there's the Overseer's Precursor Tablet, which I think is a pretty big deal, but we want to see where these settle price-wise. So these are the Precursor Tablets that guarantee an Atlas, that a map on the Atlas will have a boss if it's able to. And like other Precursor Tablets, they apply to a bunch of different maps at the same time. The exact numbers on these are really going to need to be played around with, but I think it might be possible to run maps that have got a an Atlas boss on them most of the time, and that's going to be pretty significant. So you're going to have to run a bunch of towers to make this work, but I think this will be a big deal. And Horza in chat is saying it's 3 to 7 map bosses. I think the key number, though, that is the most important one is the drop rate of these. So how common is it that you get an Overseer's Precursor tablet when you slay a map boss? What minimum levels do they have? In fact, I might just go and check that quickly on PoEDB in the background. So PoE2DB, this is called an Overseer's Precursor tablet. Overseers, oh, it's not on PoE2DB yet. Okay, so we don't have any information on the minimum drop level of these yet that I'm aware of. That's likely to be found pretty soon. But if they are available from low tier map bosses, this will be really interesting because it's something where people can farm these like on a league start character, something that's not yet very powerful, and you can then turn around and sell these tablets if there's demand for them. There'll probably be a lot of people looking to buy these early on. So just a whole lot of good things that are going on there. Now, we have these things that are being changed about monster population. So I'm going to come back to this line about map areas containing a minimum of 3 rare monsters. But there's a whole bunch of other things as well. So firstly, the minimum of 3 rare monsters. I think the really important thing here is that this is going to fix some of the spikiness of map sustain early in a league. So if you were to run your first tier 10 Waystone of the entire league, and then you got one that only had 1 or 2 rare monsters, that's going to be really, really demoralizing. It's going to be quite a setback because it's going to mean it's less likely that you'll get a tier 8, 9, 10, 11, or 12 Waystone from it. So that's something that's important to keep in mind. Now, Vincent in chat is saying they're getting them every single map boss at the moment, which seems pretty incredible. We'll have to find out exactly whether that's intended or not. I do feel like they might be intending, though, that you can run a map boss on every single map if you, or not every map because there are some that can't have them, but close to it. Interestingly, Horza is pointing out in chat that the Sulfuric Cavern's Mammoth boss seems to be broken at the moment. The summoner part of that doesn't appear, so that's the Necromancer and the Mammoth. Appears like the Necromancer's not appearing in that fight, so that ends up just bricking the map once you go in there. Hopefully that gets fixed. That's the sort of thing they'll probably fix today if they realize it. So if these are really, really common, then that's going to be a significant deal. There probably are going to be a bunch of bugs. Again, I feel like they'll probably have a hotfix out today. The Astral Projection one is really bad. One thing I will throw in at this point, as I see that a number of people have joined the stream, if you're watching this while it's live, then keep in mind that you can always, in a YouTube stream, you can rewind and you can also speed up. So you'll be able to catch up to us. So you can set the video to 125% base speed if you want, and you'll be able to catch up in about 52 minutes time. And if you want to set it to 150% speed, then you'll catch up in 26 minutes time. So that's an option that you've got if you want to do that. Otherwise, we're just going to keep pushing on. And having a quick look through the other changes that are coming up here to map contents, what they're doing here is making it so that each map area has some sort of specialty, and there's going to be more specialties in the maps that are inherently smaller. So maps might have more total monsters, they might have more essences, they might have a bias towards having shrines. The more difficult a map is to clear, or the smaller it is, the more axes it will specialize in. Now, with a couple of things here that indicate that there's going to be maps that have double the number of chests. Now, I don't know if it's been other people's experience as well, but my experience has been that chests have been generally disappointing, including the rare chests. I'm curious if that's universally the case in chat or whether it's just been me. But for me, maps that have lots of chests, it doesn't feel that good. But then again, I could just be a case of just a small enough sample size that things are going to come up better with other people. So yeah, some chests have had double the number of chests added to them. Some will have up to double the number of monsters that they had, which is substantial. A number of maps have 50% more magic and rare monsters. Others will have higher minimum numbers of rare monsters you'll encounter, although some are going the other way as well. And a number of maps will have more chance to contain essences, strongboxes, and shrines. So, whole bunch of things there, and particularly if it's a Citadel-related biome, then they're going to have quite a bit as well. Now, Unclaimed hideout areas are now going to have more magic monsters, which make them feel a bit more lucrative. Fewer rare monsters, which is pulling back some of that gain that you get with the magic monsters, but this will make them easier to clean. And I think that's the intention. They want you to have a hideout pretty quickly. So an unclaimed hideout area then becomes something that's a little bit easier to get this way. Untamed Paradise is getting massively buffed. So this is going to be double the number of standard monsters, quadruple the number of magic and rare monsters. That's something that it badly needed. I still don't think it's in a particularly great spot, but maybe we'll have to play around with it and see. That will be interesting to see exactly where that goes. And when I was talking about strongboxes, about chests before, I was talking about the regular chests, not the strongboxes. Strongboxes are getting an overhaul as well, and I've heard people say that they're in a reasonable but not a great spot now, whereas they used to be absolutely terrible. Interestingly, people are saying they're mostly getting tablets and waystones from chests in chat. Tablets have felt like I've been getting those from monsters. So the ritual tablets, for instance, the ones that are worth the most, the ritual tablets, they seem to be coming primarily from the monsters that are in a ritual before you clear the ritual. And the ones that are the waystones, the ones that are just general chests, I just don't generally find all that much. Anyways, a couple other little things here, but one that's important: reduce the damage scaling of monsters in Simulacrum encounters with added difficulty. Simulacrum +4 was considered to be the hardest thing in the game by a lot of people, and this is going to substantially pull back that difficulty. I think it'll be interesting to see if this means that Simulacrum 4, I'm trying to think the name of the unique, I think it's Megalomaniac Megalomaniac's added at, is Megalomaniac added at difficulty 2, or is it the one that's added at difficulty 4? Whatever the case, Simulacrum has some really strong loot in it, and there's a bunch of stuff there that's going to be a bit more accessible as a result of this change. And there's also things that will probably be a little bit rarer, the things that come from Simulacrum difficulty 1. I'd have to check the exact details of Simulacrum. There's been a project that's being undertaken by one of the community discords to try and work out the drop rates of a lot of these boss encounters, and they're not yet at a point where they've worked out Simulacrum. I did mention the Shockwave Totem bug, yeah, that basically the build was fixed in conjunction with Astral Projection Support, but kind of bricked without it. And if you are using that build, you want to temporarily use Astral Projection Support, even if you're not interested in using that support gem. It will make the build function again until they hotfix it so that the build works without it. Now, we've also talked already about one of the boss changes, but I mentioned in a previous video, I don't want to completely reiterate this, but here we've got a buff and a nerf at the same time to Waystone Sustain. The net effect of these would be neutral, except that we've got these Overseer's Precursor tablets, which then is the thing that's missing in order to make this a net positive in terms of the amount of Waystone over sustain players have got. When I'm talking about Waystone over sustain, what I'm talking about is once you get rolling, this is not the case at the very start of a league. Once you get rolling, you get many, many more Waystones than you're ever able to use. And so this means that you can pretty aggressively Varl them. Varling Waystones is really good. And if you do end up with a couple of them that kind of get wrecked by the Varl Orb, it's not some catastrophe. If you take a 15 and it Varls down into a 14, or if you take a 15 and you Varl it and it gets the Annullafall suffixes, Annullafall prefixes, add as many suffixes as are needed in order to fill the map out, not even to fill it out, to match the number of prefixes that were removed. That tends to be a detrimental outcome as well, although it does have some uses. But if you get one that ends up way too difficult for you from that, that's something that you can still manage there. Now, we have a number of other little changes here, but one thing that's interesting, they've reduced the number of monsters and small chests from breaches by 15%. They mentioned in the live stream announcement for this patch that breach causes a lot of problems whereby extra monsters are spawning beyond what the game can handle. And as a result, a lot of the time, those actual monsters weren't appearing. Like, they were attempted to be added to the map, but they're not being added because there's too many monsters active at once. So this may actually not be 15% less loot from Breach. Breach is definitely the best of the mechanics right now. Breach is probably going to get substantial nerfs in patch 0.2.0, whenever that comes about. But for the moment, it is actually probably less of a nerf than it looks like. Simulacrum splinter drops are going to be increasing by 20%. And There's also artwork for waystones that are instilled with layers of delirium. Something I want to point out to people, the lowest tier of the instilled emotions. I always call these oils because that's my Path of Exile 1 brain, but the things that come from delirium that allow you to anoint an amulet or that allow you to anoint maps. The very lowest tier of these is practically free, and it is really, really good to apply onto your maps. It adds a fair amount of extra quantity and rarity, we believe. We know how it works in Path of Exile 1, where it adds, I think it's 10% more quantity per 20% delirium, I believe is the exact number. And the rarity is comparable. It's substantial and it's a more multiplier to it. So in Path of Exile 1, delirium layers are a really substantial thing. Path of Exile 1 has a different mechanic. It's not using the Amulet Anoint components. It uses something else called delirium orbs that don't exist in PoE 2. But the lowest tier of these instilled emotions are really, really good to just throw on maps you intend to run, and then you can corrupt them after that if you want to. And basically, you're just not throwing away anything valuable. 50% of the instilled emotions that drop will be these lowest tier ones, and they'll just get you some extra value out of them that way. It is now more profitable in gold to vendor various things that you are never going to vendor because they're worth way too much. At least this is my Trade League brain thinking here. Maybe in SSF you could find yourself in a weird spot where you've got everything you possibly want out of Ritual. You've got no intention of going back to the audience with the king, but even then, like, do you really need that much gold in solo self-found? Like, I can't imagine that you do. So yeah, this is one of the most nothing burger changes that I think I have ever seen there. People are asking in chat, has the patch been live? Yes, it's been live 3 hours at the moment. 3 hours ago, it went live. It's a 10 gigabyte download because they're doing a whole bunch of various MTX editions. So MTX that existed in Path of Exile 1 are being ported over to Path of Exile 2. So these are just cosmetic things, but it's something that's significant. It's going to mean that the patch is going to take a bit longer. So if you're someone that's watching this and you haven't yet downloaded the patch, I'd suggest you go and download it now if you don't have lightning fast internet. So if you're in my situation of having Australian internet, you probably want to do it because it's going to take many minutes at least. The next changes here. So we have Supercharged Slam had one particular shenanigan that was applying to it where it could hit far more of the screen than intended. And essentially this was not intended and it's been nerfed. Supercharged Slam now has each successive aftershock gains 50 centimeters radius up to a limit of 3 meters, previously uncapped. Now, there is always a cap in Path of Exile 1 and 2. Players can't affect monsters that are more than, I believe it's 15 meters away. And to give you a sense of how big an area that is, that's something like 1.5 screens widthwise. So anything that's more than 15 meters away from you, you can't hit there. And that's something that, yeah, basically this was one of the things that was making the warrior feel more playable. And it's kind of one of those awkward things where there's no balance changes to Archmage. And as a result, I feel like this is just going to drive some of the people that had been taking advantage of the exploitable state of Supercharged Slam. It's just going to drive them to reroll as Sparkers. So I don't think this is a particularly good change. Anyway, Scavenge Plating is now going to grant you stacks for duration based upon the enemy's rarity. Essentially, this is a buff to a skill that's still kind of pretty dubious. The reason that this is so problematic is that everything about Scavenge Plating is tied to you caring about monsters having... it's tied to you caring about your amount of armor on your character. And I think that like the Path of Exile 2 community generally has come to the conclusion that armor is completely terrible. I think the underlying biggest problem is not so much the weakness of armor, it's the weakness of life in general. And ultimately, armor and energy shield compete with each other for space. Evasion and energy shield compete with each other for space. Evasion's pretty solid though. So even though it's probably not as strong as energy shield, it still at least feels competitive. Armor though, the problem is that in Path of Exile 1, there's a number of other mechanics that boost armor. So you're not just relying upon armor's inherent damage reduction in PoE 1. You also have Cast when damage taken Molten Shell, which can then give you an ablative hit point buffer of 5,000 extra sort of temporary hit points. It's not as strong as Guard is in Path of Exile 2, but it is functionally something akin to Guard. When you take a certain amount of damage, you get this proc, and that keeps you alive for a little bit longer until you get out of trouble. Likewise, you have Divine Shield and Aegis Aurora in Path of Exile 1, which allow you to turn your enormous amount of armor that you've got on your character into some form of burst recovery. So, in Path of Exile 1, there's a number of side mechanics that mean that armor's inherent percentage damage reduction that it provides against physical ends up being better. On top of this, armor also has other mechanics that scale linearly with it, like physical damage mitigation as a flat stat, and a couple of other things like endurance charges. All these things make armor more of a rounded defense than it is in PoE 2. PoE 2, you don't have any of this rounding, and you also just have much smaller life pools. So that's all of the problems that are there in terms of the way that armor is not quite working in PoE 2. I don't know that it is just armor. Ultimately, I feel like it would be interesting to see how the game would feel if player life pools were larger. If instead of, I think you gain 12 hit points per level. Maybe that's my maybe that's my PoE 1 brain that's thinking about it. But I think that it's possibly something where in PoE 2, if you gain 12 per level during the campaign and then 50 per level at endgame, maybe that would work better. I'm not sure that's the right number, but a whole bunch of things in there. Now, let's quickly go through. One thing I want to do, I'm going to take a quick breather from speaking to put a little pinned note about the stuff with Shockwave Totems, because people are going to keep asking that. People who join the stream late will keep asking that. So let me just do that first. Okay, sorry about that all. I just wanted to get that pinned because I figure that's going to get asked a lot, and it's the nature of a stream is that not everyone is there when you say something. So I just want to have that be the thing people see, because it's going to be a question that I think is going to get asked more times. And now, here we have one of the changes that's tied to Temporalis. So, Lightning Bolt skill granted by Choir of the Storm Unique Amulet has been renamed to Greater Lightning Bolt to differentiate it from the skill granted by Staves. Triggered Greater Lightning Bolts are now unable to trigger a subsequent Greater Lightning Bolt if the first was a critical hit. Greater Lightning Bolt now deals roughly 450% the base damage of Lightning compared to Lightning Bolt. I'm not sure how much that was previously, but essentially the idea here is that this is stopping some of the craziest propagation of critical hits that were going on with top-end Temporalis setups in particular. And we'll come to another thing that's being done to Temporalis here as well, which is that Temporalis unique body armor can no longer reduce the cooldown of a skill to below 100 milliseconds. Partly this is a performance change, partly it's a power nerf. And I think the core thing here is that this is a performance change aimed at closing a number of exploits where people were using Temporalis. Now, you can use Temporalis to unintentionally cause a client crash. This is something that happens all the time with it, but it can also be used to intentionally cause one. I did a video on this a while ago when the cheating stuff was really at its worst in PoE 2, and there hasn't actually been an update from Grinding Gear Games on that, because there's a whole bunch of things people were doing. I think now it's probably safe to talk about everything. So yeah, I think it's now safe to talk about everything. The way people were doing this was that they would use Temporalis and what's now called Greater Lightning Bolt. They would critically hit their own Frostwall, and this would then trigger more critical hits. And you'd get this escalating cascade where each crit that you make triggers multiple more crits, and you get this exponential scaling of the number of critical hits that are happening. This then results in the game conjuring more and more of these lightning bolts at a time until the entire server crashes. Not this, when I talk about the server, I'm talking about the specific server instance that is running the map that you're in at the time. Now, what people were doing was that they would attempt an RNG craft, and then if they weren't happy with the results, they would then invoke a crash with this, and that would then warp their character back to the last time the instance was saved. Now, Graniger Games changed it so that instances would save more frequently, particularly when players use certain crafting methods. But one that was there probably the longest was that there were shenanigans involving creating multiple instances of the Trial of the Sekma using only one copy of the relic that grants Temporalis. So that's the entire problem there. That's the entire problem that existed with Temporalis. I think it is now safe to talk about it because I have patched everything. The key thing is that they're reducing the cooldown to a minimum of 100 milliseconds, means that some of these chain reactions can't happen anymore. So both the chain reactions that players were using to get more and more power than I think even GGG intended from that item, but also the ones that were being misused intentionally to crash the server. So that's enough talking about all of the exploits. I do think one thing that's important to note, though, is that it is still not safe to trade for items that are unidentified as a result of this, because one thing with Path of Exile 1, it's known in PoE 1, and I believe it's the case in 2 as well, that items, they do all of their rolling not when you identify them, but when you loot them off the ground. The intention here is that this is something that if they were rolled the instant the item was generated, then that would be something that would then cause a bunch of server lag when a whole massive item explosion happens. More the case in PoE 1 than 2. So that's the first problem that comes up. The second problem that they want to try and fix with this is that if it was done on identifying, anytime one of these rollback exploits came up, you could then just essentially divine an item for free by doing this server crash stuff. So this means is that if you've got, say, let's say, what's a unique that a boss can drop that, or what's just a unique ingenuity. If you've got an ingenuity that drops with, hang on, ingenuity drops unidentified. So if you pick up an ingenuity and it's 46% when you identify it, you could then crash the server and then roll it back and check what it was. Even though they've fixed it so you can no longer do that, a number of people have already peeked at the stats on their various unique items. So that's going to be a real problem. Graniger Games have not made any statements at all about the exploits, which is a problem. Like, they really need to do a write-up on exactly what happened and also give an estimate of the number of people that are going to get banned over it. In PoE 1, there were similar problems that came up, and everyone that went anywhere near intentionally invoking server crashes to rollback crafts, everyone that was anywhere near it got themselves permabanned. And this was the most severe permaban they have. Like, if you're involved in RMT cheating, so buying currency off websites that allow you to cheat at the game by buying currency for real world money, those RMTs, the usual punishment they have for RMT cheating is that the character that bought all of the gear gets deleted, completely deleted, so not reverted to the state they were in beforehand, and you'll get banned until the next league, so until the next economy reset. That's their usual approach for people that got involved in RMT cheating. Then they got more serious bans, like if you were to, say things in chat that were particularly heinous, but not at the level that they're criminally bad, like sort of thing that gets a permanent ban. Someone in that situation might be banned, but then be allowed to make a new account down the track. The people that are involved in this sort of cheating with intentionally crashing instances, they'll be told that if any future account they make that is identified as being the same person will also get permabanned straight away. So that will be something that will happen. Like, yeah, the stuff with I think the thing with Elon Musk is that he just has enough plausible deniability that he can say he was even though I think he was flagrantly boosting, I don't think it's proven in his case. I think he can say I was just memeing and that I just took footage with permission from another player playing the game and said it. So I don't think you can say it's proven that he did it, even though I think he probably did. Whereas the people that were doing this instance crashing, that's another factor entirely. It would be quite funny though if Elon's account got banned, but I doubt that's going to happen. I think there's this thing in the world where people as rich as him are pretty much immune to most consequences. Anyways, going back to the various things that are in here, with that little sidetrack aside about exploiting and cheating and all that sort of rubbish. I guess it's tied to some of these changes. Clarified Vine Arrow's description to explicitly state that it hits enemies on landing. This is intended not to be a change. You'll see I've missed one here, but this is intended not to be a change. This is just to clarify what it does. And remove the aura tag from Pain Offering for consistency with other minion skills, as this does not directly create an aura. The aura is created by the summon minion. I do believe there is an effect that this matters on, and that is something that is near, I call it the Templar start. This is my PoE1 brain, but there is no strength int class in the game at the moment, but the two strength int classes quite close to their starting area, there's a 20% increase to the magnitude of auras you create. And so that's one that will, that's one that's there. That's going to be a big deal there. Now, let's talk about this metagems change, because this is something that there's been a whole bunch of shenanigans that were not intended, but that were particularly strong. I know Jung Rowan was playing around with builds along these lines. I'm just not on top of exactly what they were doing. But basically, the intention here was that you could chain react various metagems off each other. And this was not intended to be possible, and it's no longer going to be possible. This is one of those things, though, where grinding gear games have considered this a bug, but a lot of players haven't. They've just considered this to be the intended functionality. And in a lot of ways, I feel like this is the sort of change that probably shouldn't be made, except at the same time as sweeping changes to, like, you know, to nerfs to things like Archmage support that clearly need it. So I am not a big fan of this thing here. And like, I feel like if they're going to do a change like this that feels like a balance change, even though it's intended as a bug fix, this feels like a balance change. I feel like they should have also done some other balance changes, most notably to Archmage support. Or Archmage. I'm calling it Archmage support. That's my PoE1 brain again. But anyways, that's out of there. Yeah, on what people are talking about with account boosting, there's a couple of things with it. So firstly, account boosting is bannable cheating, as people have said in chat. As I said, the only reason that I think it's not 100% clear with the Elon Musk case is that, like, he could claim that he wasn't the person piloting the account and that he just put his face over footage just for a meme. I wouldn't believe that, but I also wouldn't consider it proven beyond reasonable doubt that he did it. But all of that aside, it's bannable cheating, and one of the things that's really bad with it is that it opens your account up to future compromise. So any of those sites that say, hey, pay us X amount of money and we'll boost your character to level 90, what they will do is they'll then come back, you know, a month later and then clean your account out. If you have, you know, maybe you can protect yourself by changing your password, but maybe not, because they'll have to get around the various login authentication steps that require your location as well. So there's a bunch of problems with those sites. They're very untrustworthy. These sites actually have offered me substantial sums of money to shill for them, and I always turn it down. And every time I get one of those offers, I advise people not to use them. So that's your account boosting. So yeah, that's why it's bannable. And I guess, yeah, we'll see. Like, it's like people are saying in chat, you know, the rules don't apply to someone with both the wealth of Elon Musk and also the ability to impose his will through control of Twitter. Like, that's something that's really, really bad. There's a lot of things with account sharing as well that, like, a lot of it is undetectable, because imagine you're in this situation, right? Imagine you're a teenager that lives with your parents, but your parents live separately to each other. So you spend some of the time with your mother, some of the time with your father. They don't live together. So you've got two addresses that you regularly play at. And then on top of that, maybe you start dating someone and you spend a bunch of time at their place as well. So suddenly you're playing at three different residential addresses. You also play at university sometimes, and you also play at your part-time job because maybe you do some sort of job that you can get away with that. So suddenly you're playing one account legitimately at 5 different addresses. And that definitely happens. So they can't have the settings too high on automatically picking up account sharing. And that's why I think a lot of it goes undetected. But the flagrant stuff is really bad. So yeah, let's jump out of all of, like, I feel like there's been a lot of discussion around various types of cheating in the game, whether it be the item duplication stuff, whether it be other stuff. Let's jump back to the patch notes specifically and the monster changes. So firstly, we have the essence changes here. Monsters now have increased toughness per essence modifier affecting them. I believe that this is going to be an enormous boost to the hit points of essence monsters and an enormous nerf to the effectiveness of life and mana leech against essence monsters. This is something that exists in Path of Exile 1. And in Path of Exile 1, it's enormously visible because PoE 1, there's just a lot more power creep than there is in 2. And this means that for monsters to feel impactful, they really need to dwarf the baseline monsters in the zone. So you can have situations where monsters can have like 6 or 7 essences in PoE 1, and one of these monsters can have like hit points substantially higher than a pinnacle boss. But this is done partly through an increase in their hit points, but through this mechanic called toughness, which is just a decrease in damage taken. So it's really, really substantial there. And people are saying in chat that they still die instantly. So this has not been an overly substantial thing. Maybe they've just given them small amounts of toughness. In PoE 1, it's really noticeable. You have often, they're the toughest monsters in a zone. It is the case here. Essences need to be killed in PoE 2. I don't think I like this mechanic very much. I think like essences should be excluded, partly because this means that essences need to not be as lethal as they could otherwise be. If essences were opt-in content, they could be made much tougher. When they're not opt-in, when they're something you just have to fight in order to progress, then I think they're quite a bit worse. So yeah, for those of you that are PoE 2 only players, to give you a bit of a sense as to the sort of difference in hit points, you can have a player that your time to kill against a normal rare monster is 2 seconds, and your time to kill against an essence monster might be 3 minutes. It's that big, the difference. And then if that essence monster also has life regen, then you just can't kill it. You just flat out can't kill it. It'll regen faster than you can damage it. Likewise, there's Consecrated Ground is a mod in PoE 1 that causes monsters to regain a certain percentage of their life every second. If the map has Consecrated Ground in it, you have to very carefully maneuver the monster so that the essence monster never goes on Consecrated Ground. And yeah, you can get into a real nightmare. The thing is, in PoE 1, the goal in every map is to kill a map boss. And if you're running early in progression, you can just ignore a heinous essence monster that you encounter. Or you can just crack it open, see how it feels, and then you can decide, yeah, I'm not going to do that. In PoE 2, essence monsters are mandatory to kill if you want to complete the map. Otherwise, you have to abandon the map and then come back in and go, all right, now I'll run another map in this one to get in order to path through. So pretty mean. Added a small delay before monsters released from essence monoliths can use their skills. There's a couple of things that have nasty abilities if you're at point blank range. I feel like this is a buff to people who play in point blank range in combat. So warriors and the like. Probably not the biggest buff that they need, but it is still something there. Forsaken miners now throw less grenades, which also have their damage reduced and their visuals improved. And there's also Roger the Dread Engineer is getting this same nerf. This is substantial. These were among the most dangerous monsters in the game, I feel. These were the ones that drop a grenade, and then those grenades, they then light them off with a flamethrower. Those grenades were heinously deadly. Roger the Dread Engineer, I feel, was the boss that killed me the second most in Cruel difficulty. In normal, she was easy, but in Cruel, she was really vicious. And once I realized that her grenades were one-shotting me, then at that point I realized, oh, I've got to play this differently. I have to really respect those things. And then I got through it. But at first, it wasn't very clear what was one-shotting me. And so it was really, really sketchy. People are talking about, yeah, the back on the essence monsters, that your time to kill a pinnacle boss in PoE 1 can be less than a big essence monster. That's true. I mean, part of the skill of big essence monsters is just recognizing in PoE 1 which ones you shouldn't be fighting at all. But it was the case that there were some that were kind of crazy, especially Soul Eater and things like that. Necrovigils come up in chat, just in PoE 1 nostalgia. This was a mechanic where you'd have this would be applied to a whole pack of magic monsters, and when you killed one of them, it would leave a permanent puddle on the ground that as long as that puddle remained, that puddle would remain as long as the corpse did. So if you blew up the corpse, it was gone. But if you didn't blow up the corpse, then while any of the monster's allies that also had Necrovigil that were within range, they would be unable to be killed, and I think they were unable to be hurt as well. It was really fearsome. They also had Phylacterial Link, which exists on one map boss in PoE 1 now, where you'd have a group of monsters, might be, say, 8 monsters in one group, and one of them would be designated as the Phylactery holder. Only that one could be hurt, and that would then rotate around them during on a set time schedule. There were a bunch of things that were really, really mean early on. So kind of some funny stuff there. Okay, so there's a number of other changes that are similar. So Faradun Plaguebringers, their Detonate Dead is being nerfed, it's being made clearer, and it's losing some range. I think the big thing here is the range. I'm just not sure how big the range currently is. Telegraphing on it has been improved is a big deal, because one of the things that I think is always annoying, like if you get one shot by something that's telegraphed, it feels like you made a mistake. If you get one shot by something that's not telegraphed, it feels terrible. And I think this is something where they're making it so that there's more counterplay. You know, these really deadly abilities, and if they're clearly marked, it's just like, oh, I've got to get out of the way of this. And so that's something that's really, really, really vicious there. Reduced how far away Lost Man Zealots can use their media skill from. The visuals have been improved. And also from the same monster, their Lightning Storm should now always strike the telegraph marker as opposed to somewhere random. I love this, where you get telegraphing, but the telegraphing was entirely wrong. All of this section is about nerfing the outlier monsters, and people are saying in chat that this seems to have worked pretty well. A bunch of things in there were over the top, and that they've been brought back into sensible levels. And as a result, people are maybe not taking all that much less damage, but the damage is less spiky, so they're not dying anywhere near as often. The Filthy Crone no longer uses their projectile vomit skill point blank in front of you, because that's just rude, and now has a basic projectile attack. This is one of the most deadly things I can think of in the game. There's a few other things like this that were just super, super lethal. Filthy Firstborns on Death Explosion, it's had a reduced area of effect, and the visibility has been improved. Like a whole bunch of these sorts of changes. I won't go through every single one of them, but let's just quickly go through some of the ones that matter to bosses, because those are going to be a little bit clearer. Now, the Bloated Miller's Slam. The Bloated Miller is the first boss that you fight at the very beginning of the first zone of the game. There is also a map boss based on this. I'm trying to think which map it is. Can anyone in chat confirm which map it is that has the Bloated Miller as its boss? I know I fought it and had no trouble with it, but I can't remember which one it was. In any case, that'll come up in chat. Zelmrath the Colossus and the Forge map, which is the one that it's based on, there's a number of fixes that are being made to this boss. This is the Titan that you encounter midway through Act 2, and as I said, also in the Forge map. Really, really cool boss fight. This was the first campaign boss I found genuinely difficult. So it's Riverside Woodlands, is it? Or okay, Woodlands seems to be where the Bloated Miller is. So yeah, that's where you'll find it. Zelmrath in the Forge map. The attacks more closely match the visual effects, and player targeting behavior for Zelmrath the Colossus is better. The arms are no longer targetable, so you can only target the thing that you can actually hurt. So that's something that's intended to bring this nasty boss down a little bit. But ultimately, the key thing here is the clarifications as to where it's going to hit. Hey, oh, thanks, Not Jay, for the super chat there. May your Valorbs have interesting results. Oh, OBS is telling me there's some new feature there. Celebrate this. So I've got this thing that's popped up. Just a fun little side note here on this. On the super chat there. I've got this little note here that says, let's celebrate their first super on a live stream. And I click it, and then all of the options are just the moderation warning. So it's like, put user in timeout, hide user on this channel, which is the shadow ban, remove, report. It's really funny that comes up there. That definitely gives me a bit of a laugh. So yeah, a little bit of a sidetrack there, but that's something that definitely made me laugh a little bit there, that it just comes up with all sorts of moderation tools instead of anything else. It is tempting for the jokes, but I won't do it. It's people that like with YouTube, the tips are a small thing, but they do definitely add up, and they help you keep doing live streams and stuff like that. Yours is saying it can report or block them as well. That's yeah, that's hilarious. Anyways, silliness there. It's something that if it was easier to get onto YouTube, to get onto a real person, I would send them some footage of that and say, hey, this is probably not what you intend to have happen here, but it's not easy to get onto a human being, and so I'm not going to be able to do that. Now, that's the Bloated Miller, the Zomrath the Colossus, Ultimatum Bird, the absolute rip machine Ultimatum Bird, Balak the Sky Seer. I couldn't remember this name because every time I saw the boss, I was in panic mode, and so I was like, oh, and then very quickly afterwards, I was dead. This thing is now going to have the damaging area more closely match the visual effects, and most importantly, the tornadoes are going to push you slightly away when they appear. So it's not like you're just going to get a tornado drop on your head and then you're dead. Instead, they're going to ramp up. They're going to become an arena hazard rather than something that's like a, haha, gotcha. So that's something that'll be really interesting. I'm looking forward to fighting that guy again, actually. I think it'd be quite interesting to see. Ultimatum I need to play around with a bit more. It's a fun mechanic. It feels like it's a bit tougher than they intended it to be, unless it's intended to be one of the hardest things in the game. And anyways, that thing is really rough. Now, Kidlat is mentioning something in chat that is one of those tips. I need to make a top 10 tips and tricks for Path of Exile 2 video at some point, because that question comes up all the time. Mana Siphoner. The number of times I hang out in one of the Facebook Path of Exile 2 groups just to watch the sorts of things that people comment about. And one of the questions I see all the time is, how do you handle Mana Siphoner? It feels completely and utterly broken. It does a large amount of lightning damage. It feels unavoidable. The key thing is that it is not affecting the entirety of a disc. It is affecting just the donut. So there is a safe spot in the middle, and that safe spot is big. That safe spot is it's clearly illustrated, but it's also just not that clear that it is safe. And what you want to do is rush in towards the monster if you're close range, or if the monster has the ability to dictate range on you. And then at that point, it usually won't run away from you unless certain monsters do have the AI to do that, but most of them don't. And that's the way that you handle it. You're getting close to them. So that's one of the things that I feel like is the most, one of those really nasty things that it's a bit of a gotcha moment, even though I feel like it's well telegraphed, but that is probably because I know in Path of Exile 1 how it works. And so I can easily see how people don't pick that up. But yeah, big Eye of the Storm for that ability. And safe spot feels smaller in radius in period 2 than period 1. That's something interesting. It may be that there's just different scaling in AoE, or it may be that player and monster collision is a bit more intense in period 1. That's something I'm not entirely certain of there. Okay, so reduced how often Prowling Shades can use their invisibility skill. Thank you. This is the thing that was driving me nuts, and I wasn't aware of it. Now that I see it in the patch notes, because I'd passed over this line when I was reading through this before. I'd passed over this line and I'd missed this, but that is something that is a huge improvement there. Huge, huge, huge improvement. This thing was just driving me absolutely nuts. Adjust the frequency of some monsters. It's annoying when they say adjust the frequency, but you don't know whether it's more common or less common. I assume that Prowling Shades, because they're so frustrating, they may have been made rarer, but I don't know. Just reading this patch note. Does this mean 60% less often? Does this mean 3% less often? Does it mean 3% more often? Does it mean 175% more often? I don't know from this patch note. That's annoying. I think that should be something that's explicitly stated, or at least can say like massively reduced or significantly increased or slightly increased if you don't want to give exact numbers. Valzillets are now less likely to repeatedly use their Eye of Winter skill. I'm trying to, those things, yes, the things that spam Eye of Winter, now that I think about it. So Eye of Winter, for those of you that aren't familiar, it's a skill that you can get in Path of Exile 2, as well as in PoE 1 for that matter, but it's based on Diablo 2's Frozen Orb skill, which fires off an ice bolt towards the monster, and that ice bolt fires off a spiral of other secondary projectiles. This thing is something that doesn't do very much damage when it's used against you, but it's kind of nearly impossible to dodge. So it's probably a substantial improvement having them be less common. And improve the visual effects of the Fire Zealot's Firestorm. I'm trying to place that one. It hasn't annoyed me, so I'm not exactly sure. Adjusted the damaging area of the Executioner's attacks to more closely match the visual effects. The telegraphing for his guillotine slam has been improved. So the guillotine is the one where he goes, the guillotine drops. It's a really cool voice effect. If you haven't heard that, go and fight the Executioner and just prolong the fight a little bit so that you get to hear that. The voice effects on that, the voice work on that fight was done really, really well. But it's definitely something where I was never sure exactly how far I had to get away from that guillotine slam. So now they're making that a little bit clearer. Adjust the visibility of Cultist Archer skills. Their Chocolate Rain skill now deals less damage. Oh yes, they were very dangerous. I think those are the ones that are tied to ritual mechanics. So when you encountered ritual monsters in a zone, they could rip you apart because they dealt chaos damage. And I feel like chaos damage is really dangerous early in progression, and then later on it becomes less of a problem. It's a sort of weird spot, which is in some ways the opposite of Path of Exile 1. In PoE 1, the area penalties to chaos resistance apply. So they don't apply in PoE 2. They only apply to the 3 elemental resistances. So when you get to maps, your chaos resistance is usually negative 60% in PoE 1. What this means is that monsters are balanced around the expectation that in tiers 1 to 5, you have negative 60% chaos res. Tiers 6 to 10, you have about 0 to positive 30% chaos res. And then tiers 11 and up, you have a meaningful amount, but it's not really expected that you have 75% until tier 17 maps, which are they're the equivalent of citadels in PoE 2. They're sort of the precursors to the final boss. Final bosses. So for that reason, chaos damage, like your amount of chaos resistance, because it's so low early on, the monsters that deal chaos damage, they don't do very much of it. PoE 2 chaos damage monsters seem to do quite a bit more. So this is something that is a fairly big deal. They're making those a bit easier early on. I feel like these and the Spitting Snakes were the 2 most dangerous chaos damage monsters in early endgame. That period where you probably don't have meaningful chaos resistance in PoE 2. And Jamunra, the Risen King's zombie skirt no longer spontaneously explodes on death. Like, this was one of those silly on-death effects that just... This was a gotcha moment. I feel like there's still a few gotcha moments in Path of Exile 2, and honestly, there's a couple in Path of Exile 1 as well. The fight against the tier 16 version of the Elder fight is something that has a really nasty gotcha in it, where at the end, there's an NPC that tells you, hey, come to me right now. And then if you don't, there's an arena-wide explosion that hits everywhere except her bubble that you can go into. So that's like a little bit of a rant about gotcha moments aside. But Jamunra, the Risen King, I'd never been hit by this. I didn't even realize it happened. I did a guide to this boss fight, And I didn't realize there was an after death effect on it because it just wasn't made clear. But that's something that's just rude. Mighty Silver Fist Commando roll now deals significantly less damage. Silver Fist is interesting in that all of the abilities that this boss has, this is one of the first mini bosses you encounter in Act 3. Silver Fist does a lot of damage with a bunch of slams, but also had one thing that wasn't a slam that was doing a lot of damage. So the slams are still one-shots, but the commando roll is not intended to be a one-shot, and so they're fixing that. People are reporting in chat that they have just fixed the Shockwave Totem issue, where Shockwave Totem, when used without Astral Projection Support, was not working. So if other people confirm that, I will then think that it's I'll then remove the pin from it. That's good news. Let's just quickly confirm that in another window that there's a bring up Path of Exile 2, bringing up the newest of the patch notes just to make sure that this is hotfix, and it is Shockwave Totem would sometimes fail to attack if surrounded by enemies or if there were no nearby enemies at all. Scavenge plating. Excellent. So that is now fixed. I'm going to remove that. I'm going to remove the pin, unpin message. Excellent. Okay, now one of the things that's annoying for people who are watching this after the fact, I have talked extensively about that bug at the start of this, and I don't think I'm going to be able to go through and particularly remove everything. But that's all fixed. Yeah, Silver Fist, the line slam is the thing that's most likely to kill you. Or at least it's the thing that, at least it feels like it's a one-shot. So it doesn't feel bad. At least I'm talking from a softcore player's perspective here. Like if they're in hardcore, maybe this boss is still overtuned. But in softcore, you feel like you've made a mistake when you get hit by the slam. You don't feel like you've made a mistake when you get hit by the commando roll. That's my attitude on Silver Fist. And people saying aggro range is huge on him. That's interesting. Nothing can aggro beyond 15 meters in Path of Exile 2, but I feel like Silver Fist moves pretty fast. Unless you can slow him down somehow, whether by inflicting chill, whether by inflicting freeze, or whether by physically obstructing him. I think you can physically obstruct him with an ice wall. Not sure offhand. There's a bunch of things there that are kind of rude. The fights, he's one of the tougher bosses in the campaign. I will definitely say that. Reduced how often Azak Stalkers use their slam skill. I can't actually place which monster that is. Walking Goliaths no longer deal damage twice when they fall over. The slam now deals more damage in the center and less around the edges. I like the idea of slams that do more damage in the center if they're well telegraphed, and then do a small amount if you've made some attempt to dodge them. And so basically, there's this, even if you can't get away, it's still worth trying to. I think that's something that's a good thing there. People are confirming in chat that that this boss that Silver Fist does indeed run straight through Ice Wall. The thing is that it will still, the crystals will explode, and that will still cause a chill. That's the reason that I'm able to get away from him then. I agree, audio cues in general would be something that's useful on a bunch of these sorts of deadly slams. Something I noticed when I was recording the video for Count Geonor and for Jamanra, and also the forthcoming one on Doriani, a number of the act bosses have inconsistent things that they'll call out. So Jamanra has one ability that I call 10,000 Spears. I only use this right near the end of the fight, where he fires up 7 spears into the air, and then they fixate on the player at various times, and they fire at him. So from memory, he starts the ability at time is 0 seconds. At time is 3, 3.15, 3.3, 3.45, 3.6, 3.75, and 3.9 seconds, one of those spears targets you, but it targets where you were a second before it lands. So the solution here is pretty simple. It's to keep moving. The thing is that this is an ability that is dodge or die. When I say dodge or die, like you can get hit by, you get hit by 2 times by it and you're fine, but if you get hit by all 7, you're dead. And the trick to it is that you need to hear it coming, because it might be started when you're off screen. The thing is that's frustrating. He sometimes says 10,000 spears, but there's another voice cue that I can't think of at the moment that he uses as well. And so if you're in this position where Jamanra's using his abilities a lot, There's like multiple different cues you need to watch out for. I like it when there's consistency on the deadliest ones. So yeah, whole bunch of little silly complaints there, but that's a little bit of a sidetrack. I'm very good at getting sidetracked, I will say that. Reduce the distance at which Earnwalkers in the Trial of the Sekmas are able to initiate their skill. We've also fixed an issue where they were not dealing damage correctly, meaning they now deal more damage. Now, I don't know whether they say more damage here, whether this is more honor loss, or whether it's more hit point loss, or whether it's both. I would assume it's both, because most things, the amount of honor that you lose is based upon the amount of hit points that you lose. But I'm not absolutely certain of that. So Earnwalkers are... I haven't grinded the Trial of the Sekmas, so I'm not particularly certain which monster they are. Something I might just experiment with. But there's a bunch of things there that the Trial of the Sekmas can be really sketchy early on. I feel like the best way to approach it is actually to come back 3 or 4 levels after you get access to it, and then just use the extra power that you've gained. So the ones inside the urns. Okay. Slither Spitters now no longer deal damage twice with their projectile attack. We've discussed this in a previous video. Density of monsters in Exile has been reduced. Monsters contained in the area are now more likely to be of a weaker variety. So this is close to the end of Act 3. This area was... I don't recall it being particularly deadly. Maybe it's just because my character had gotten stronger by that point. I feel like there's something where it's often hard to judge whether something is actually hard or not, because your character has turning points in its power. And I feel like the character I was playing had big turning points at level 9 and 11 gems. And so when I got those, I felt like I was way stronger suddenly. And if an area was too hard, it didn't really bother me because I was just so much stronger than I was. And then we have the density of monsters in the Dreadnought areas has been adjusted to result in less swarming encounters. This is actually also going to be a nerf to the amount of XP that you get from that zone. One of my tips that I was giving to people that were having trouble with progression was to just go into the Dreadnought and farm it a few times. I found this was coming up a fair bit, especially with people that weren't following an established build guide. They would find that the Dreadnought was sort of the area where they were starting to fall behind the curve, and they could gain 4 levels in the Dreadnought pretty easily. They could also upgrade all of their skill gems from levels 7 and 8 up to level 9, including their spirit gems, because if you did this a few times, you would get all your spirit gems as well. And that ended up making you feel quite a bit stronger in the Dreadnought. So that was that's my first thought there, is that if they're nerfing the Dreadnought's difficulty, that's also going to nerf the XP and how lucrative the zone is. So that's something to keep in mind. This is like probably intended as a buff, but it is going to have some drawbacks as well. Improve the telegraphing for Azak Shamans detonate deads and the crystals left by Vile Goliaths when they die. Chaos Pustules in ritual encounters have had their visuals improved. Oh my god, that was needed. The Chaos Pustules were so hard to see sometimes. The Impending Doom modifier in Trials of Chaos now has more time before it explodes and has had its visuals improved. So this is the ability that causes an annulus of dangerous stuff on the ground. This is a slow ability, but it is quite a deadly one. Most people regarded it as one of the worst mechanics you could spec into in Trial of the Chaos. I did not find this. I think it might just come down to how much experience people have with fighting the regular Elder encounter in Path of Exile 1 back when that was hard, or the Uber Elder encounter, or the double Uber Elder encounter. Just depending upon your character's power. So we're not talking about when your character is so strong that you can trivialize these encounters. We're talking about when you just get there. And also there's a tier 17 encounter in Path of Exile 1 that, again, I've just got that bit of experience with that is very similar to Impending Doom in Trials of Chaos. So there is a safe spot in the center, then there is a massive kill zone, and then there's a safe spot if you're outside the area as well. So a whole bunch of things that are, like, this is a really dangerous ability, but it's also one that you could quite easily control if you just didn't panic. If you're like, okay, I'm going to make a plan. I'm either going to go for the safe zone in the center, or I'm going to go outside the entire thing. And I'm just going to chill. I'm going to play normally until it's about 3 seconds until it goes off. I feel like it was 7 seconds previously. I know it's 7 seconds in the Path of Exile 1 Elder encounter, because I did a boss guide on that long ago, and I timed it for that. But it's something that you just need to keep in mind. It is super lethal though if you get hit by it. I think it was doing like 75% of my health in damage the time that I tested it. And that was when I was over level for the ultimatum zone as well. People are saying there were some bug issues with it and also red-green color blindness issues. That would make sense. I don't have red-green color blindness, so I'm not in a position to judge whether that was a problem there. And I also never had it hit areas that it wasn't meant to hit. But yeah, the thing that was nasty with it, you could tank it, but when you were hit by it, it did so much damage that you kind of needed to use a life flask to recover. Because I only did it on a life character. So that's something that was kind of sketchy. And yeah, the second tier does alternate between a ring and a circle, but that's the circle is much more dangerous. That's one where you've got to get away from it. Anyway, this is being nerfed substantially. It's got more time before it explodes, and the visual improvements, if people are saying that it was bad with color blindness, then that is a good little accessibility change. Improve the telegraphing of the anchor drop from monsters affected by Essence of Torment. I don't recall encountering this, so it's probably something that's very similar to the boss Admiral Valerius's anchor drop in Path of Exile 1, but it doesn't really jump out at me as something that I remember fighting. Improve the visuals of the area of effect from monsters affected by Essence of Electricity. The time before it explodes has also been increased. So basically a couple of nerfs to the nastier monster abilities that were tied to various essences. Volatile plants are now much more noticeable both before and as they're about to explode. Again, this is like the Chaos Pustules thing. This is just some of the things that were really nasty that were hard to see that are getting fixed. Elemental explosions caused by minion death or those periodically cast by a rare monster have had their visual effects improved. The delay before these explode has also been increased. The ones that were periodically cast by rare monsters I never felt were unfair, but they might have been a bit more unfair when in conjunction with increases to monster action speed. After that, we have the aura from prevents recovery above 50% monster modifier now has a visible radius, and energy shield monsters on energy shield modifiers on monsters now provide more sensible levels of ES. And then the shielding monsters modifier, this was turned off, and I can't remember what it actually did. So I'm kind of curious if anyone can remember what that was meant to be. It was turned off because there's a problem with it. I feel like it might have been a boost to monster energy shield or something like that. So yeah, there's... Oh, the anchor is the executioner ability. Ouch. Okay. I just must not afford a Torment Essence then. I'm surprised by that. Or maybe I've just killed them really quickly when they've come up. That's kind of interesting there. So ultimatum monsters were getting enormous amounts of ES. So they're then having this thing where energy shield monsters on modifiers now provide more sensible levels of ES. And the shielding monsters modifier was the one that gave them that. Okay, that all makes a lot of sense. So it's all... Make this reasonable so that it's something that is impactful, but that it's not feeling fundamentally unfair. And an incredible amount of ES to bosses. Yet, one of the things that, like, Path of Exile 1 has this mechanic where there's a map mod. This is like one of the worst map mods you can get. Monsters have... A typical figure might be 41% life added as extra bonus ES. And monsters, generally speaking, the way that bosses are coded in PoE 1, they'll have something like 1200% base life, 100% base ES. So base life might be 1 million. So this means that they'll have 12 million life, 1 million ES. But then if you get this mod that's 41%, then suddenly that's going to be 5 million more ES, and it ends up being really substantial. It's probably the most powerful single defensive mod, and in PoE 1, map mod effect can scale up really high. So you can get this over 100, and you can get this like to 120% there. So really, really sketchy things. And it's something that it's an inherently pretty dangerous mod. I feel like it might have been better actually for GGG to give a set number to the amount of energy shield that these sorts of things give. So for instance, I don't know, instead of saying monsters have X% of life added as ES, maybe it would work better if they said monsters have 16,000 energy shield. And 16,000 is not a number I'm wedded to or anything there, but sometimes it can feel really broken. And okay, anyways, let's go through the general changes and improvements section here. It is quite funny hearing everyone talking about. I just have not noticed this anchor skill. So it's Essence of Torment. I'll keep an eye out for it. And yeah, let's quickly go through some of these nasties here. So enabled migrating from solo self-found to parent leagues. This is fantastic. This is something that I think should exist for all hard modes in Path of Exile 1 and 2. I think the reason that solo self-found is the most popular of the hard modes is not really that much to do with the hard mode itself. It's that if you start playing in hardcore, in Path of Exile 1, this is the case. In 2 at the moment, it's not, but it will become the case soon. If your character dies, that's the only way that you can leave hardcore mode, and then you're put into permanent standard rather than going to the associated league, like the one that would be competing with it. So in hardcore, you can't migrate out. You're stuck in hardcore, or you go to standard. In solo self-found, you could go from settlers solo self-found to settlers in Path of Exile 1, whereas you would go from hardcore settlers to permanent standard. That's the way that it would work. And then there's the ruthless difficulty setting in Path of Exile 1 as well, which doesn't allow any form of migration at all. And this is something that I've always thought they should allow it so that you can opt into a hard mode, and then if you find out you don't like it, it's just easy to migrate out of that. I'll have some sort of impact on trade league economies, but it also has an impact on trade league economies the way it's set up at the moment. There are people who care about their standard character wealth in Path of Exile 1 who play temporary league hardcore simply to pick up new items, then trade for them in hardcore, and then transfer them over on a character that intentionally dies, over into permanent standard. So there's a bunch of this sort of messy thing that goes on. I think they should make it so that you can always opt into a difficulty setting when you create a character. Then if you decide it's not for you, you can just opt out of it later. Whether that be solo self-found, whether that be hardcore, whether it be ruthless, or ruthless probably doesn't fit in Path of Exile 2, but in PoE 1, that would be something I think would be better. There's a couple of things they can do when you don't have the ability to do that. Like they could, for instance, have hardcore only items or solo self-found only items if they wanted, if they didn't allow you to migrate out. But I think it's better just to make them clear. These are difficult. These are opt-in difficulty modes. If you're interested, play them. If you're not interested, then just pretend they don't exist. Anyway, all that out of the way. That's sort of more of a rant about PoE 1 than PoE 2, honestly. Strongboxes. They've been adjusted to spawn waves of enemies over a shorter period of time. Strongbox fog effect now fades away once all waves of enemies have spawned. Significantly increased the chance to encounter research strongboxes and added a visual effect to distinguish which monsters are being spawned by a strongbox. All of this is good, but strongboxes, the drops from the box themselves are not particularly great. The number of monsters that spawn are significant, so there are quite a lot of packs, but I'm just not seeing anyone thinking that strongboxes are great at the moment. Like they're all right to fight against, but they're not something that feels so strong you feel encouraged to spec into them. I guess a little bit of a question. If the option existed, would players who are in chat use a Strongbox precursor tablet? Keep in mind that this prevents you from using a different tablet. So you can't use an irradiation tablet in that tower instead. You have to choose to go with a Strongbox tablet instead. I'm going to assume the answer is no here. Yeah, research Strongboxes. I might just check that out because it doesn't ring a bell for me either. That may mean that there's something that's a little bit special. I'm just going to check if there's anything on the PoE2 wiki about them. Strongbox. See if there's anything about currency items. Oh, I have had one of those. It was terrible. It has 3 augmentations. So I have had one of them. But yeah, so if you're a PoE 1 player, they're an Arcanist Strongbox. And Yeah, so just watching the sort of things that people are saying in chat, that like people wouldn't be interested in using a Strongbox precursor tablet. There are mods, yes, that can roll on precursor tablets, but you don't really have that much agency over what mods you get on precursor tablets. It's not like you get so many precursor tablets that you can roll for perfect things. You're probably using most of them, and most of the time you're not annulling your precursor tablets if you get a bad mod on them either. So yeah, Strongbox farming in Path of Exile 1, for anyone that's not familiar, the core intention there is that you're not actually Strongbox farming for the purposes of the loot that comes out, that is generated by the Strongbox completion reward. It's actually for the loot that comes from the monsters themselves. And Strongboxes are just a way to put one object on the map that includes a magic monster pack and 4 regular monster packs usually. So there's a lot of monsters in one place, and you can juice them further with various mechanics. But you can also get various rolls on Strongboxes that add more monsters again, and there's things that can pump up the amount of loot that you get from each Strongbox. So PoE 1 Strongboxes, that's their primary functionality. PoE 2, I just don't feel like they're that good at the moment. Like they add a few monsters, but you could just run another map, like if it's not super quick. And so that's one of the things that's messy. Anyways, that's all the Strongbox changes, as well as a couple of them have been adjusted to activate after a delay. So when you do tap a Strongbox, you probably want to run away from it straight away afterwards. Now, charms now have increased visibility. One thing I've found with charms, it's interesting talking to people that value the +2 charms explicit modifier on belts extremely highly. I don't. I don't think that it is a great suffix. I think it's a good suffix, but I don't think it's a great one. And ultimately, ingenuity is so much better, I think, than any rare belt in the game. That generally speaking, I find I would always opt for one charm setup on a build at the moment. I feel like unless it was a budget choice, it was a budget choice because I couldn't afford ingenuity yet, or I couldn't afford a well-rolled ingenuity, or maybe I was forced to use specific unique rings that don't have very substantial numerical effects on them, like Call of the Brotherhood. If I was in that situation, then yeah, maybe I might use a belt that's rare. But generally speaking, I'm just going to use ingenuity rather than using a tri-charm belt. People will definitely have different opinions on this, but I feel like I am just not won over to charms being strong in general. That said, some people think they're good, and they now play an effect on your character when they're used. The other thing I really dislike about charms is that I remember early in progression I was struggling with Viper Napuatsi, and I think I considered grabbing an antidote charm for her, because the thing that was killing me was the Arakali's web ability, which like deals a substantial initial hit, but then also puts a nasty poison on you. And one of the things that I realized was that my antidote charm would run out because I would take her minor hits first. They would poison, so I'd get hit with a poison. That'd proc my antidote charm, and then later on I'd be stuffed because I'd then get hit by the poison I cared about. So yeah, all of that out of the way. Charms are things I am just not a huge fan of. I probably value them less than most people do. That said, there's a useful quality of life improvement here. Yeah, if ingenuity, that's an interesting point someone's making in chat, that like ingenuity would be interesting if it had the text, you cannot use charms. I think that would be a really interesting line on it, because then you could mess around with different numbers of charms. I also agree they are not comparable to utility flasks from Path of Exile 1. Like, Path of Exile 1 has a Quicksilver flask for 1, just so much power there. And also, you can have a charm, like you have agency over when it procs. You might sacrifice that agency for convenience, but you have the agency there. So you make a deliberate choice if you want to do that. And there's so many other things that you can do. And anyways, all that sort of stuff out of the way. I think this is one of those things that is useful for some people. If you're playing an up close and personal playstyle, then charms are better because you probably need to have some sort of mitigation of freeze and also stun, and that's something that's a bit harder to do. Like you can find other mechanics that will that will do this, but that's something that's really strong. I agree with the comments in chat about Quicksilver Flask and particularly maps where you need to backtrack. But they have added in something with what do you call it? Those teleport markers inside maps. So there are some things there. Here's one of the biggest changes. Socketables such as runes can now be overwritten by placing another socketable item into the socket. This is just a fantastic improvement. This is something that, like, I was thinking of my character, just the fact that I'm overcapped on fire res at the moment by a lot, but the best boots that I've got have fire resistance socketed in them because that was what I needed at the time. It's really frustrating to be in that situation. Now this is going to be able to be fixed easily. Attempting to salvage an item now highlights which items in your inventory can be salvaged and displays item sockets. I thought it already did that. But flasks with quality can now be salvaged. This is actually a big change, something I missed in the earlier thing. So now glassblowers baubles are going to crater in price. Here we have the change on armor has been made more effective by approximately 15%. Now, I believe that this is changing the 12 in the formula to a 10. That would be approximately 15%. And it would actually be better than, it would actually be a better effect than 15%. It would be more like 20% in terms of the effects. So this means that if you had 10,000 armor before the patch, it would now work as well as 12,000 did before. This still is probably not enough. There's a couple of things that just flat out don't work. There's mechanics that say 25% of your armor applies to fire damage, I think. That just flat out doesn't work. There's a whole bunch of other problems that this just isn't enough to solve. Ultimately, I think the solution to armor is having something akin to what exists in Path of Exile 1, where you've got Castle Damage Taken Molten Shell to provide a ablative hit point buffer. You've got Aegis Aurora, you've got Divine Shield. All of these things help fix things up. One sec, I just had my phone going berserk. I'm just going to try and find out what that was. Why are you singing out at me? You are singing out at me because someone has pinged me on WhatsApp. That can wait. That's not going to be anything that is worth interrupting a stream over. More monsters can now be pushed while dodge rolling. Generally applies to most monsters smaller than a skeleton. So previously, this was applying to monsters that were house cat sized. Now it sounds like it's applying to monsters that are like Labrador sized as well. So this is going to mean that getting surrounded is going to be less common. It can still happen, but it's just going to be less common. Objects such as delirium shards. So this is the things that delirium encounter mechanics that when you tap them, they spawn monsters. They can no longer be pushed by other monsters. I didn't realize they ever could. Omens are now 60% more likely to appear. We know it's 60% from something that Jonathan said in the interview previously. Reduce the chance for items to roll some of the less desirable item modifiers. This is one of those things that's always a double-edged sword. This is like good for 99% of players, and then 1% of players want something really obscure. And that's going to be kind of annoying there. That's going to really start, really going to start being frustrating there. I will say that there. Distilled emotions required to instill a passive skill onto an amulet no longer revealed. This is just something that's aimed at new players, like avoiding overwhelming them with information that's not relevant to them yet. Once they encounter a delirium encounter and succeed enough at it to get a single distilled emotion to drop, at that point, they're going to learn the mechanics of how that works. A couple of other little tiny things here, but here's the big one about Expedition. People have reported in chat that they've not been happy with the new Expedition vendors yet. I want to really test this. So rarity of items in Expedition vendor shops now increases with shop level. Now, shop level, if it works like PoE1, shop level is equal to your character level up to 84, I believe. Then, up to 85. Then stays 85 up to 89, then becomes 86 at 90. That's how it works in PoE1. PoE2, the item levels are sort of 4 levels lower than they are in PoE1. So it might be that there's some inflection point where 82 becomes available. 82 wasn't available previously, though. I think it was capping at 81 or 80. So Jack in chat is saying that Expedition is still disappointing, having tried it with 50 exotic coins. I kind of want to experiment with it. Maybe it's something that there's a couple of things that can work with it. But we shall see exactly there. It might be like there's things where the best ways to work it, the best ways to use it haven't been worked out yet. That's certainly the case with ROG in Path of Exile 1. ROG has the same mechanics as all of the Expedition NPCs here, but he is stronger. Like, there's no question. In PoE 1, he's really strong. It's like one of the things, if you ever want to make a lot of currency in Trade League in PoE 1, you spend the first couple of days living doing ROG content. Living and breathing ROG content. It's fantastic. And so it looks like it's character level up to 79, and then at some later point it's 80. So it's not the bases, it's the rolls that are bad. Anyways, as I said, I want to test it out myself. I want to play around with it, find out how it feels, and then get a little bit of a sense. And you're saying like you don't get enough rolls, and some of them make the items worse. Yeah, in PoE 1, I love ROG books, which are logbooks that are dedicated to ROG specifically, and I also love in-map events for now, since some of the changes they've made in PoE 1 that Expedition's just so fast. It is absolutely fantastic early in a league there. Side note, I'm going to do around a little bit of a poll quickly in the chat. Are people PoE 1 players? I'm just curious to get a bit of a sense for this audience. So, sorry, a quick little disruption here. All right, I'm just going to run that poll. I think I can do that. Yeah, I can. Excellent, excellent, excellent. I'm expecting that. I think most of my audience are PoE 1 players as well, but this is one of those little polls that I need to get a bit of a sense of, especially because I'm hoping that we'll get some information about PoE 1 patch 3.26 reasonably soon. The previous schedule that they'd tentatively announced, and they always said this was subject to change, but it was that there'd be substantial information at the end of January on the next patch. Now, they could well have missed that deadline. There could be slippage on that. It wouldn't surprise me because PoE 2 had some issues early on, and it also was bigger early on. But kind of curious there. I do think that this will be skewed, yeah, because obviously if you look at PoE 2's peak player numbers, the peak concurrent player numbers are something like, I think they're like 175, 180% of the peak concurrent ever for PoE 1. Whereas my channel has grown about 10% since PoE 2 came out. So based on that, I feel like my viewership, 90% PoE 1, 10% PoE 2 or something like that. But I also feel like there's probably a bunch of people who are PoE 1 only players who are not watching this stream because they're not interested in it. And there's also going to be a bunch of other things. I'm kind of curious what's going to happen there. PoE 1 is a very different game to PoE 2. If you're in that approximately 13% of players. Let's just end that poll. So it looks like it's a 7-to-1 split in favor of yes, and at the moment, and that's sort of in line with what I expected. I was expecting it that the section of Path of Exile 2 players that follow my channel are going to be very much biased towards the PoE 1 players. So we'll see exactly what's going to happen there. Anyways, so Expedition vendors, people are saying that it's disappointing so far, but I'll withhold judgment until I see it myself, because I am kind of hoping that it is better. Visual clutter in many maps has been decreased in order to improve visibility. This is fantastic. This is something that's really badly needed. There is a tutorial for activating your first persistent buff skill gem. This is really important. This wasn't a major thing that was just unclear to me. I had to ask people, how are you making your auras work? I think I chose Arctic Armor first, which actually is really good. Like, Arctic Armor, I feel like it's an underrated skill. But leaving that aside, Arctic Armor felt really good when I got it, but I had to figure out how to turn it on, and that was not clear. I had to ask advice on that. So if I miss that out, then it's going to be a big improvement there. Improved and fixed inconsistencies for walkability throughout areas in the campaign as well as maps. This could be good. This could also be bad. There's something that was mentioned earlier where, or something somewhere mentioned in this, where you could unintentionally roll through frost walls, and I felt that was intended. So that's going to be a little bit frustrating if they're tightening up some of those things, but we'll see how it goes. Now, improve the loading time of the world map. This is the biggest change that is hidden in just a single sentence in this. This is going to be a huge improvement. A couple of changes here that are very minor coming up in group play during the campaign. Revive time improvements. Good if you're involved in group play during the campaign, but not very impactful for most people. Elva now has the option to gamble when placed in your hideout. Reviving minions that died from being out of range now instantly revived near you, rather than basically appearing next to you dead. This is a huge improvement. There's something that's like just a massive frustration with minions earlier. Now, we have here that there's a quest tracker that shows which quests are applicable for the area you're currently in. This is just quality of life improvement. Another couple of quality of life improvements. Charms, a bit more visual clarity on them. We're talking about charms before, not hugely sold on them, but this is still an improvement. Update the world map icons for when you have completed quests, encounters, and found items to make it more clear that they have been completed. Thank you for that. That is a huge improvement. It's one of those quality of life things that was frustrating, but because I haven't been running the campaign in the last week, I'd forgotten about it. Definitely something that's a big upgrade. Now, this is an MTX change, propagating weapon effect options to the cosmetic panel UI. This is something that was a huge request in PoE 1 and was eventually implemented. There's a number of cosmetic MTX that grinding your games sell that apply to a weapon, and the intention is that you can use them on both of your weapon slots. So if you're using a weapon and a shield, a weapon and a focus, or or two weapons, the intention is that you can actually use them on both. That was not the case for a long period of time. And so there are a whole bunch of MTX that you could only use on one slot for a long period, and then they improved that. Big improvement there. A couple of things about artwork. Hand of Wisdom in action, because it's so dominant, it's got 3D art, which is something that's not a huge amount there. Flavor text. This is an important one. Omen of Witlings, very much endgame crafting. Like, you can only afford to use these in any number if you are very solidly in endgame. These are the Omen that are uber for Chaos Orbs. What they do is they bias the annul to always remove the modifier that has the lowest minimum level. So that's a huge improvement over the normal effect of a Chaos Orb. They remove all of the RNG from what gets removed, but they don't remove any of the RNG from what gets added. The other thing is that with a good item, Omen of Whittling also, if you get unlucky with an Omen of Whittling, it's likely that you then get a new mod that's added that is also able to be removed by an Omen of Whittling. So you can kind of use a few of these to guarantee you get a single high-level mod, but this is a very expensive crafting thing because each Omen of Whittling, last I checked, they were they 4.5 divines last I checked? Not exactly certain there. So there's a lot of stuff there. Just catching up on chat quickly. Thanks for the compliments in chat there. Yeah, I try to avoid I try to avoid clickbait in general. That's something I do with this channel. What do I think they're likely to change with Howler? So they're not changing anything until 0.2.0, most likely, but I just feel the numbers on it are too high. They'll just nerf the numbers on it. And yeah, the Magic Find Academy Discord is a wealth of knowledge that Vincent's raising in chat there. Is that Fubgan's Discord as well or not? I don't think it is, but there's content creators that specialize in particular areas of content. I always think of Fubgun and Snoobay when I think of Magic Find, and they're people in Path of Exile 1 anyway. They're some of the most knowledgeable people about it. And as much as I hate the impact that Magic Find has had on the game, as long as we're stuck with it, it's going to be, they'll be probably some of the most knowledgeable about it. Although one weakness I find is that often people claim things have been, that they'll claim that something is known when it's like the most commonly speculated thing. Like there's this thing where a lot of things that are untested get reported as fact. For instance, I don't think that the magic find diminishing returns was known until Slippery Jim proved it. Slippery Jim proved it, but before that it was not there. Okay, let's just jump back into the stuff that's going on down further. For people that are, I see a number of questions about things we discussed earlier in the thing. Keep in mind that with a YouTube stream, you can always rewind it, and you can also speed it up to catch back up. You can just navigate around in them a lot better than you otherwise can. There's been one hotfix so far. I don't think, has there been a second, or has there just been the one? I think there's just been the one so far, but let's just have a quick look if there's anything else. Yeah, there's just been the one hotfix that we already knew about. So again, that's something that will come up all the time. Let's keep going through here. We've got improved performance on the Chimera, improved performance of the Lava in the Molten Vault, the fight that has Path of Exile's only hard enrage mechanic so far. Reduce screen clutter and improve performance of the effect that applies when killing rare monster objectives in endgame maps. Improve performance of areas with very bright lights that cast many shadows. So that's the Temple of Kopek. Ziggurat Refuge as well. Oh, okay, that's good. Ziggurat Refuge will be, because that's somewhere that you spend a bit of time at endgame. Improve performance of Ziggurat encampment in order to reduce the occurrence of unloaded textures. Burning ground can no longer spawn underneath interactables such as levers. Thank you for that. Augury map, you are an absolute mess still, but hopefully with all the changes where maps like Augury would be the ones that got a bunch of the buffs that were mentioned earlier. Monsters can no longer spawn near the entrance to the map. This often causes the player to immediately be attacked upon moving. This is, again, very much the issue with Augury map. So Augury should be quite a bit better than it was before. I know that my first thing on getting into an Augury map was always to look at the directions that monsters could fire projectiles from and drop a bunch of ice walls in front of both of them. And of course, that's something you can do on certain classes, but other characters are just not going to be able to do that. So yeah, this is here. Added a keyword for honor resistance. This one made me think about it. This is one of those lines that yesterday when I was going through the patch notes, I was like, what does that mean? And then I realized, oh, it just means that there's like a keyword that you can mouse over and then find out what this does. So that's not any real importance there. That's a quality of life, very minor upgrade. It's nothing else. Delirium monsters are no longer untargetable and should no longer push you during their emerge animation. So getting shoved around is something that can be quite frustrating. Now pick up with items and interact with some objects while performing other actions. I hope this includes the Augury lever. Attack in place stops movement option, no longer prevents walking on skills that can be used while moving while using WASD movement. Need to play around with it. I don't really use WASD movement myself, so I'm not really sure on that. And then there's just the continually to incrementally improve the sound, art, environments, and effects. They always include that line there. Now, the next thing we've got here is all of the item changes. I don't want to go through everything here, except I just want to start with something, which is there anyone in chat that's in-game at the moment that has a legacy unique that they are willing to just throw away for a little bit of an experiment? This can be a bad legacy unique. Like, it doesn't need to be anything good. What I want to know is when you Val them, if you get the Krangle Divine outcome. So this is where it divines it, but the Divine Orb is beyond normal limits. Does it also have the effect of applying a Divine Orb? Like when it says, say here, the Alchemira unique shield now provides a bigger boost to mana than it used to do. What I'm thinking of here is, like, if you were to Val Alchemira and it was a legacy one that was 15 to 30, and you say you Krangle Divine it and it comes up as 33 mana, that would be a legacy roll that's then been boosted. I'm kind of curious how that works there. So if anyone's able to check that, it's only 1 in 4 to get a Krangle Divine, but lots of rubbish uniques got buffs there that you would be able to be tested there. As long as it says that it can be updated using a Divine Orb, that's the main thing. If you just the first one, if you can just report what happens, because I did ping Grinding Games on Twitter, but they're too busy to respond to clarifications like that. In any case, if someone has a look into that, just any legacy unique that you think would be clear. and that you don't care about losing because, like, yeah, they're not. Lots of them are going to be bad. Okay, so Alchemy Era is going to get more mana. I don't think this is a huge transformative amount. I think that's going to be the case with a lot of these. A lot of these are just going to be boosts to the amount of stats on them that are not decisive. I do think this one's interesting though. Arvel's Wheel. I had Avril Lavigne in my mind for some reason. Then I'm actually still going to have Avril Lavigne in my mind whenever I think about this shield now, just because of that misreading of it. But Arvel's Wheel is no longer going to have 40 to 60% increased block chance. It now instead is going to provide you with a boost to life and mana. So that's something that is that's something that's intriguing in that, like, this is probably a buff, but it's not a strict buff. And I don't like it when we end up with these sorts of legacy items that they're meant to have been buffed, but sometimes the legacy version is better. That's worse. And yeah, if you have a corrupted legacy item, so if it's already corrupted, you will not be able to get the boost where it says existing versions of this item can be upgraded with the Divine Orb. So yeah, that's not going to help. Avril's Wheels sure sounds complicated. Yep, yep, I like that one. Your username definitely checks out in comment there. Ashran now provides a fire resistance bonus that is larger, and it also provides a strength bonus. And 6 Years Wrath, very small changes. I kind of feel like we can skip most of the very small changes here and maybe just focus on the things that I'm confident are going to matter, or the things that look like they're really good. So the Barrow Dweller unique body armor now provides damage of enemies hitting you is unlucky while you are on low life. This is very powerful text, but it's just a lot harder in Path of Exile 2 to sustain being on low life. In Path of Exile 1, there's a number of tools for it. You can use Petrified Blood. You can reserve life to pay for auras. A whole bunch of things that you can do in PoE 1. In PoE 2, it's just much harder to get there. So I think that this is something that's like not all that strong. It just does something cool. A bunch of things gain Thorns damage, and like Thorns, I'm just not sold that there's any use for it at the moment. People have tried to make it work. People have tried to make it work just for the memes, but it probably can get a little bit through the game, but there's just too many things that you have to dodge. That's the real problem with Thorns. And okay, that's interesting. So someone's just pointed they got the Krangle Divine on a Briscrap, but is Briscrap one that... A Briscrap's not one that mentions that it can be updated with a Divine Orb, though. That's the thing that I'm looking for there, if there's anything else. So Coward's Chain is a point. Yeah, Coward's Chain is an option there. So yeah, that's there we go. So we've got a bunch of people who are getting things that are like, you rolled a Blackheart with low flat chaos damage rolls, and you did get the higher roll. So what numbers did you get on your Blackheart? So what was the Krangle Divine outcome, Dougie? What was the minimum and maximum chaos damage to attacks? So I'm just kind of get that information. I just like to have that confirmed. And maybe that only the ones that specify that they can be updated with a Divine Orb are going to get it. But it may be a bit weird too in cases where the mods that are present changed on an item. So anyways, having a quick look here. A number of things gained resistances. This is actually probably the thing that might be the most significant. So 6 to 8 chaos damage to attacks. Yeah, so 6 was impossible. 6 was impossible beforehand. So Dougie's confirmed it that yes, you can get the updated versions through Krangle Divining. And Jarn Grape is the other one you're talking about. So the Jarn Grape is... Yeah, Jarn Grape doesn't have the text about using a Divine Orb though. So let's go through all the ones that I think are going to be more significant here, which, like, in general though, most of these are picking up a resistance, which is significant, but it's not transformative. and in general, they're like maybe 2 or 3 passive points of power on a lot of them. So for instance, Blacked Out is gaining 10 to 20 cold resistance, which is fine. Black Braid is gaining 10% tri-res, which is substantial as well. Lots of these are getting a couple of points. But for Barrow Dweller, I'm not sold. Like, people have pointed out, there is a unique that works that can mimic low life, Coward's Chains, but that clashes with Ingenuity, so it's not really wearable. Basically, Ingenuity is too good. It is the dominant item. It's the Mage Blood of Path of Exile 2 so far. So based on that, I don't see any real utility for this. Lots of small stat numbers here, but nothing that jumps out as particularly exciting. And continually flicking down this list, we've got Bramblejack has got Cannot Evade on it now. Like they're really determined to make this into a complete meme item, but it does some funny things. Brass Dome is interesting. So Brass Dome is getting a substantial buff here. The thing is that it's still kind of rubbish at the moment. Brass Dome, if armor was really strong, Brass Dome would be really good. 400 to 500% increased armor, previously was 300 to 400%, and the drawback to maximum resistances has been reduced on it. It also has the line of text that you take no additional damage from crits. The thing is that this item is just so bad that it's still bad, honestly, I think. The interesting thing, though, is that you can now Krangle Divine this and potentially get it like really, really high armor rolls. There could be some phenomenally high numbers on this, but I still think it's just not an overall package. And runes can be, that's an interesting one that I hadn't thought of to check. Someone's just confirmed that you can overwrite runes in corrupted items. I thought that would be the case, but it's just good to get that absolute confirmation while we're talking about uniques and things like that. Lots of items are getting thorns like we were talking about, basically something that no one really cares about. Just think if there's anything else that really stands out, though. Is Bronzebeard good now? I don't think it is, but I hope I'm wrong on that front. Let's go Bronzebeard. Bronzebeard is, let's bring up the stats on this thing. It is a Horn Crown, low amount of armor, low amount of ES, 10% reduced movement speed. Oh, wow, that one is terrible. It does have a lot of reduced effective ailments on you. It has a few useful mods on it, but 10% reduced movement speed is just bricking. Like, I wouldn't even use that during leveling, even with 100 life on it. I don't think I would use it if it was 200 life. It is that bad. I would say, like, that item is, I'd forgotten how bad it was. I must have looked over it really quickly. Now, a bunch of other things are just getting better resistances again, but there was something else that was interesting in here. And, oh yeah, this was something that was intriguing. A number of unique weapons are having their physical damage changed from percentage added to flat added. I'm not sure why they're doing this, but it's going to mean that they just interact differently with a few things. Particularly, this is going to mean that Choba Chaba is now substantially better with the rune that gives percentage increase to physical damage. So I don't think that any of these really get there, but it is something that's worth remembering that it's there. Someone's asking how Krangle Divining works. Now, I've done a write-up for this over on Mobalytics. I'm going to do a video about it at some point. It's not going to be today because I've got social plans on this evening, so I'm not going to be able to do this. But essentially, if you jump over to Mobalytics, you'll be able to find my full write-up. The way that Krangle Divining works is it's not able to take -1 to 0, nor is it able to take +1 to 0. What it does is that the number is firstly hit with a Divine Orb, then secondly, each mod, it picks a number at random from 0.78 to 1.22, and it will, when it picks it at random, it'll be a multiple of 0.01 in there. So anywhere from 78% to 122%, all the exact percentages are a 1 in 45 chance. That is then scaled to each explicit modifier on the item, but it's a different roll for each mod. So after that, we have the most confusing part, which is the rounding. The rounding is done using normal number rounding. Everything else in Path of Exile 2 and Path of Exile 1 rounds down. This is the exception. And then the final step after that is quality is applied if there's multiplicative quality on the item. So Krangle Divining is really complex. I'm going to do a video on exactly what Varlorbs do. I'll provide some more information in that. But the key thing is that helped find this was looking at what had happened with Kelm's Hearts, with Queen of the Forest, with Fireflowers, particularly Fireflowers. Fireflower was the final piece that told me exactly how things worked. Fun fact, if people are willing if people want to make some currency, Fireflower with 20% fire quality on it is phenomenal to corrupt right now. If you've got the budget to the bankroll to lose a bunch of times, +6s are 1 in 72 to hit. Only 1 in 72. They're way more common than people think. But you need to throw 20 fire quality at every single, so 20 fire catalysts at every single attempt before you do it. All right, all of that out of the way. Let's get back to the specific details here. This feels like it's a Dark Defiler unique scepter. Now has gained 5% of damage as chaos damage per undead minion. This can Krangle Divine up to +6, which is something that could be reasonably strong. I'm just going to bring up the Dark Defiler stats in the background. Dark Defiler, just to make sure that I've got the info right. Lord Syncross, I think the chat might auto mod it. Try it. I haven't set up the auto mod to kick people that do things like that, but it might get eaten by it. And in fact, I might not see it either if that happens. I'm just going to bring the Dark Defiler onto this window because this could be something interesting here. So this is now 5% instead of 3%. And that can then Krangle Divine up to higher than that. That can Krangle Divine up to 6% of damage as chaos damage per undead minion. That just feels like it's a good number. Dougie's just, I think, has just tested something. Yeah. No, the auto mod is never set up to auto ban people on my channel. It's only set up to disallow the post. So yeah, I'm just thinking on this. 5% of, I wonder how much you can get on this. It feels like it could be quite a lot, but at the same time, how much is Skeletal Warrior? How much spirit is this again? How much spirit does this cost per use? It's oh, it only spawns 2 when it gains from the item. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure how this is going to end up feeling. I don't think it's there, but at least it's interesting to try. And there's Fernando in chat is mentioning that they Krangle Divined one into a 6%, and it was an old version of it. So there's a bunch of cool stuff that you can do there. That's just like, it's an interesting little item that people can mess around with and maybe come up with something. I'm not sold that it's good, but it's intriguing at least. What's going on here as well in the chat? There's something really strange. Chat has fallen way behind on me for some reason. Sorry all. It's I'm just having a quick look through all the chat information that's coming up here. It's and comment after comment that's not showing up in OBS for some reason. Why is this? Why am I not? Oh, that's why. Okay, I think we've just fixed that. I may have missed a number of chat messages then. Okay, that's fine. All right, sorry about that. The YouTube studio was falling behind in chat, and then it was going weird. Kidlad asks what the Omen of Corruption does. The Omen of Corruption seems to remove the 1 in 4 chance for a Varlorb to do nothing. So my advice is only use the Omen of Corruption if the item you're corrupting is worth at least 3 times as much as the Omen of Corruption. So, all right. Let's have another quick look through if there's anything else that jumps out. So I mentioned in a previous video that Defiance of Destiny is getting gigabuffed. Absolutely and utterly gigabuffed. Hey, Vincent, thank you for joining channel membership. May your Val Orbs have interesting results. And then we have a whole bunch of other little things here. Dodore's Tenure was already usable, so that's an upgrade there. But like by usable, I mean it's usable early on. Arian's Cobble is getting giga buffed. I still think this item is a meme. I still think this is a bad item. It's just that it's going to be a funny bad item now. The numbers on it are just that much higher, a bit much higher that it's now. In fact, they've just doubled everything, haven't they? Is they? Yeah, they have literally doubled everything on this item. This is like quite a bit better than it used to be. It's still bad, but it's just funny bad now rather than insultingly bad. So this is the item that has like 1,000,001 small stats on it. It's the Path of Exile 2 version of 1,000 Ribbons from Path of Exile 1, but before 1,000 Ribbons got buffed to the point that it was usable. So yeah, the theoretical high roll is pretty neat. There's also Ixchel's Temptation in Path of Exile 1, which is also very similar to this. Drops from the Trial Master and has like 1,000,001,000,001 different stats on it. It's not a good item, but it has some funny interactions on it as well. I like this design. The thing is, I think I'd like it more if the item was good enough to use. Kind of like Venter's Gamble. Venter's Gamble, if you get a well-rolled one of those, it's phenomenal. And you're definitely not going to see a Krangle Divine on this that is top end. You're not going to see a high roll on this in general. Like you'll see a medium roll, but not a medium to high roll. Now, what else do we have here? Eternal Spark has been buffed considerably, but it's just mana regenerate. The builds that care about mana regenerate, they have enough of it. Ezomite Peak is still bad, but it's slightly less bad than it was. And the other things that jumped out. So Gamble Sprint is interesting. I hate this item. Not because it's terrible, but because changing your movement speed randomly just feels so bad. That said, it's quite a bit more compelling than it was. It's still bad, but it's it's still messy. Bunch of things that are getting those resistances, like we mentioned before. Hog Hunt is getting some of that physical damage transferred to flat. Again, this is so that Iron Runes work better with it. There's a huge buff to Iron Runes, honestly. Another thing that's getting Chaos Resist. There's a bunch of things that are getting that. And then if we go down through, I think the only other things that really stood out to me, Infinite Pursuit is still bad, unfortunately. It's getting more movement speed, which it needs. I'm going to Val the ones I've got. If they end up with 30% on that, that'd be a little bit better then, but I still am not sold. And it's probably not going to get 31% either. That'd be a really high roll. And all of these are just basically kind of nothing. Lycosiday's retaliatory damage is maybe significant, like 200 base chaos damage is no joke. This feels like something to try out, but it's probably only good early in the game. I need to check Lycosiday's minimum level to use. That might be something that's intriguing. So let's go Lycosiday, and here is Lycosiday. What's the minimum level on this? Min level 28, so I feel like Lycosiday is probably crazy good at level 28. Just as a retaliatory thing. Like, you might be able to go up to Jamanra if you're Poison Spect and just shield block for a little while and just watch his hit points just go woo like that. But yeah, I agree with the comment in chat about Gamble Sprint that inconsistent movement speed gets you killed as well as feeling bad. It's just funny. Looking through here, lots of other little things, but we have Original Sin. I mentioned this in the video I did yesterday. OSIN exploded in price yesterday, and there were two groups of people that were buying it. There were people that were buying it because they thought that you might be able to apply a Divine Orb to it. I don't believe you can. I don't believe you can apply a Divine Orb to a Legacy version, but people bought them on the hope that you could. And there were also people who bought them with the intention to 3-for-1 them, I believe. There's probably also a third group that were buying them with the intention to list one of the new versions and then do a scam swap in there as well. But the single biggest changes here, Defiance of Destiny, Original Sin. The next biggest ones are probably going to be Plague Finger and to a lesser extent Snakebite. That's my feeling there. The rest of it is mostly just minor little changes everywhere and to a bunch of different things. Like some of these are meaningful, but let's talk Plague Finger quickly. This is the one that I'd forgotten to mention when I did a little bit of a comment about these, and I did mention this in the video that was talking about some of the unique buffs. These are the ones that I think matter more. So let's bring up Plague Finger so people can see it. Plague Finger. And here you'll see, so it's a very low level set of gear. Tiny amount of increased evasion and energy shield. IAS, which is a useful stat for attack builds, obviously. 20 to 30% now chance to poison on hit, was 5%, 5 to 10%. But the big thing is all damage from hits contributes to poison magnitude. This is a build defining item. This allows you to poison both with elemental damage from attacks. In that sense, it's the equivalent of Path of Exile 1's, what's the name of that thing? Pneumatic Dagger. And it also allows you to poison with elemental damage from spells. So there's a lot of flexibility that this adds. I feel like these are one of the most significant things that are changing in there. This is probably one of the biggest ones. Someone mentioned Painter's Servant. Painter's Servant, yes. I'm gonna bring those up as well. I wasn't sold on this, but I could be wrong. So 5 to 10% of elemental damage added as extra fire, cold, and lightning damage. So the intention here is that you need to then, this is like you want to do tri-elemental damage. So if you've got a spell that is dealing cold damage, for instance, you're dealing pure cold damage, then instead of dealing 100% cold damage, you're now going to deal 34% cold, lightning, and fire. But then you're also going to get this 5 to 10%. That's actually pretty high numbers. That is a very good point that people are talking about there. I had missed this. Thank you, Juke Stridewalker in chat for pointing this out. I had missed this. This is a big amount of extra elemental damage. You need to be able to do tri damage, which a lot of builds can't do. And you're giving up everything else on your gloves. You get no attributes, no defenses, 9 energy shield doesn't count, and no elemental resistances. But you are actually getting a lot. I'm thinking yeah. I'm now thinking this could be quite good. And you can then try and get ailments on enemies. There's a number of mechanics that reward you for having, just for the presence of elemental ailments. I might actually want to play around with these. Good point. Good catch on that one. That's something I just had missed how significant that was. I think I'd missed it because 5 to 10% is individually small, but when you factor in that it's 3 times, it's actually pretty good. Yeah, I think there's a lot of power in that, and thank you for pointing that one out because I had missed it. Power Tread I wanted to check as well. This is getting quite the buff, but I think the base item is too bad. So yeah, the movement speed's too low. 15% movement speed's unusable. So even though it's giving you a lot of crit multi, this is just not a good item. Movement speed is too important. Movement speed is just far too important to justify that. So going down all the rest of this stuff here, I don't think there was anything else. Snakebite is also in the poison on hit section. It does have a meaningful buff. I still feel like if anything makes poison work out of this, it's going to be the Plague Bringer. Plague Finger. That's the one that's gotten the big boost there. A couple of things got a bit of spirit in this, but not really that much significant that I can see here, unless people are pointing out things that I'm missing. And yeah, people are pointing out, yeah, in-hour slot equals bad. That is true, but that's the problem with the Hand of Wisdom in action being broken at the moment. Like, completely and utterly overpowered. Like, Hand of Wisdom in action kind of makes it so that everyone's best choice, if you're playing an attack build, is to use them, rebuild the character so that they can fit that and fit Astromantis as well. Obviously, you may not be able to afford Astromantis early on, but at least it's your aspirational amulet. Now we have a bunch of bug fixes here. One of the things that's important with bug fixes is that sometimes they are balance changes as well. Sometimes they're intended as balance changes, sometimes they're not intended as one, but they have that in fact. Fix 4 client crashes and 4 instance crashes, as well as all the things that they'll fix indirectly through the temporalis stuff. Now, fixed a bug where Mana Flare, Elemental Discharge, and a particular version of Ember Fusillade, I always pronounce that wrong, Fusillade, triggered by Dusk Vigil, were not considered triggered skills and therefore could generate energy. This, I think, is a pretty substantial nerf to some of Jung Rowan's shenanigans. I haven't been following them close enough. And I haven't been following Jung's shenanigans closely enough to be certain on that. But I believe that this is something that was a bug that he was taking a lot of advantage of. Fix bugs where some objects, such as vine arrow plants, were incorrectly counted as targets when dealing splash damage through the implicit modifier. That's Cultist Great Hammer base type. That's something that's extremely obscure for those two to be interacting with each other. Siege Cascade was targeting vine arrow plants and Frostwell ice crystals. Herald of Ice was still exploding shattered energies when the gem was set to be used with your currently inactive weapon set. That was an obvious issue. Like, Herald of Ice has been overperforming expectations, but this interaction that was broken wasn't part of that. This, however, is a massive nerf to concoction skills. They were considered bow skills and could be affected by increased damage with bow skills mods on quivers, which was never intended. This was the thing that was making concoction skills really good, and this. Does this just kill them completely, or is it increased? Oh no, it may just be increased percentage damage that was affected, which is not going to kill the builds. It's just going to hurt them. So. Yeah, that's probably a bit more manageable. Snapshotting issue with Energy Shield when using Mask of the Stitch Demon. Let's just quickly talk about Mask of the Stitch Demon, actually, shall we? Because this was something that I had a lot of fun messing around with. Let's bring this unique item up. Concoctions are still good. Okay, thanks for the clarification there. That was something I haven't played it, so I wasn't sure that they were still surviving that. So, this is hilarious, this item, right? This text, regenerate 0.05% of, sorry, 0.05 flat life per second. Oh, what's just happened? Oh, one sec. I think we may have just had a problem. I just had a crash of my YouTube Creator Studio. Oh, that's okay. It just crashed and now it's come back. Okay. Oh, that was a little bit of a panic mode there because I thought that my entire stream had crashed, but instead YouTube's backend had crashed. I keep, like, there's the window that you guys can all see, but I also have another window open that's got all of the YouTube control panel in it, and that was the one that crashed. So, concoctions were boosted mostly by plus bow skill level. I see. Anyways, we'll have to check out exactly how that worked. Now, Mask of the Stitch Demon. This is something that's come up here for another reason. But this text here, regenerate 0.05 life per second per maximum energy shield. You know what this actually does? It regenerates 3 life per minute per maximum energy shield. The reason that I know this is that I was exploring what Krangle Divine Orbs do, and Krangle Divine effects on Val Orbs do. And Mask of the Stitch Demon was the one that I couldn't explain, the last one. And then eventually someone pointed out, oh yeah, doesn't PoE track life regeneration and also damage over time effects as damage per minute? And that's what it was. So the 3 life per minute then rounds to 4 life per minute or 2 life per minute when you Krangle Divine it, depending upon whether you're lucky or unlucky. And then that then becomes 0.03, 0.05, or 0.07 as a display. So if you have a look on trade, you'll see that there are Mask of the Stitch Demon that say regenerate 0.07 life per second instead of 0.05, and that's the reason that works. Completely off-topic discussion there, all because of this change to the way that it snapshots in conjunction with the Infernalist. I'm assuming that this is something where when you turn off your weapon slots, there was something that was breaking with that. Now it was giving you probably more life recovery per second than was intended there. Fixed a bug where tier 5 bows could not roll IAS and tier 5 rings could not roll maximum life. Now, this has a drawback though. This bug fix, which is a game balance design change, also means that tier 5 and tier 4 mods for that items for that matter can now roll light radius in more circumstances than they could before. So this is both upside and downside. And basically what they're doing is they're removing the ability for top tier mods to be culled. That's the change here. I wish they'd done this differently. What they could have done here is changed it so they could have increased the minimum level for the highest tiers of attack speed, increased the minimum level for the highest tiers of life on rings. This would have felt like a very small nerf, but it would have been something that would have solved this issue and wouldn't have introduced all of the increased attack speed issues. So yeah, that's what's going on with that. There is some research that's going on into exactly what unidentified tier 5 does, but people are speculating that it bans mods that are under about 80% of the minimum level of the item from rolling, except for top tier mods now. That's what's speculated, but there's still more research in this, and I'm not sure the 80% number is right. So if the item level is 82, then that would ban mods that are like 65 and down, but maybe not exactly 65. It might be a little bit off. They have said that they would adjust the drop weights of things like light radius as well. Yeah, that is the case. So the whole package, it's probably net neutral, maybe a slight net buff. But some items are going to be worse as a result. Fix a bug where you could be briefly unable to perform any skills if you tried to interact with an object and dodge rolled at the same time. Ouch. And then there's a whole bunch of little bug changes. Fixed a bug where Shockwave Totem did not work when used with the support gem Astral Projection. This was fixed, and this actually required a hotfix to their fix, so this is now corrected. Shockwave Totem now works with or without Astral Projection, but for a period of time, for about 3 hours after the patch, Shockwave Totem was not working well without Astral Projection, so you're kind of forced to use it for that period, but that is now fixed. A whole bunch of other really minor things here. I'm just going to look to see if anything jumps out here. Fireflower. I've talked about this item a little bit. Let's bring it up so that people can see it. Fireflower. Now, this is a really strong amulet. This is one of the better drop anywhere uniques in the game. It's not super rare, but it is rare. And it has +1 to 4 to the level of all fire skills. It also has a drawback because this can corrupt. This can Krangle Divine to +5, but if you already put 20 fire quality on it, that actually rounds up to 6. So you can get a roll of +6 to all fire skills on this. This is a 1 in 72 chance when you Varlorb a fire flower that is 20 fire quality. However, it also has this drawback. Take 100 fire damage when you ignite an enemy. This is now working. This was not working for a period. So anyway, Fireflower has been fixed so that so that now it does do this backlash damage to you as intended. So it's weaker than it was before, but it's still a really good item. I feel like Fireflower is actually one of the most unsung items in the game at the moment. People are talking about it. People have been talking about this item a lot, but it's, yeah, really good. Now, we have this fix here to the Arbiter of Ash. This is a nerf. The way forward was bugged. It was meant to drop tier 15 Waystones. It now drops tier 15 Waystones, but it was dropping tier 16s instead. So this is a change that's been made that is net negative to the way forward node on the Atlas passive tree. Sorry, on the Arbiter's passive tree. And then a whole bunch of other little things here that are interesting. Something that was breaking characters very rarely. Like this is not something that would come up very much in normal play. But this is now fixed, so broken characters caused by this bug that I didn't know existed are no longer there. And then there's a whole bunch of other little things that don't seem to be all that significant. Savannah, Abyss, and Seepage maps have had some pathing issues fixed. Hate Forges with negative rolls are now going to be honest about what the negative roll is. And of course, one of those changes is going to affect so many players. Like every casual player is going to be rejoicing about this. Fix the alignment of the Mirror of Kalandra within the currency stash tab. Something that very few players will notice, but that is still an important little thing to eventually fix. And that looks like it's basically the primary things there. Now we go to the controller improvements. I am not the person to talk about controller mechanics. I have my controller sitting here, and I really should probably set it up at some point and maybe run a character with it. But yeah, I haven't done so. Crossbow reload bug fixes are big, apparently. That feels like the person that I feel like knows much more than me about crossbow skills is Lolcahol. It'd be the person that I would recommend people check out for things along those lines. I think the tier 16 drops from the Arbiter of Ash were corrupted, I think. So yeah, controller interface improvements, always happy to see this, but as I said, I am not experienced with them. I agree, I really want to see controller switch. So for people that are not sure what that is talking about, what Jack says is mentioning there, controller switch is the ability to just instantly pop between the two. Like you have your keyboard and your mouse set up, you're not really using them, but then you come to some particular interaction where the keyboard is much better. And the idea of switch is that you can just instantly jump across and start using the keyboard instead. At the moment, I think you actually need to go to the login screen, don't you? And in order to use controller swap between them, it's, yeah, kind of painful there. Anyway, lots of other things to have a look through there in the controller improvements if you're a controller player. Console improvements. Now, I'm not a console player. I think I mentioned in a previous video that the last console I owned was literally a Super Nintendo, and that would have been, like, I'm pretty sure the SNES came out in 1990, so it would have been 8. And I got it a little bit later than that. I feel like I might have got it when I was 10 and had it through most of school, and then, yeah, just maybe got rid of it during year 12 or something like that. So, like, that's how long it's been since I've owned a console. I finished school in 1999, so yeah, it is more than a quarter of a century since I've owned a console. That said, this is massive. You can now run item filters on console. This is the killer feature for console gameplay, I think. Like, this is the last thing that they were missing, not for full parity with PC, but to be close enough that it's better. So yeah, absolutely massive. And then we have the minor things here. Localization fixes. This is all shenanigans related to alternate languages. So if you speak a language other than English better than I do, then this may be of use to you. So for instance, there's a couple of upgrades to the display of Thai text on consoles for the section of the player base that are both in the console subset and also in the preferred languages Thai subset, which is definitely going to be some people. Like, this is an upgrade. It's good to see these sorts of changes that are being made. They just don't apply to me, so they're not things that are particularly important for me, but they are still good changes. Now, microtransactions. Let's have a quick look at what we've got here. Siren Wings, Siren Cloak. So basically the whole Siren set and Deepwater set, which I think was the Atlantis mystery box in PoE 1. I don't think I own that. Onyx Oblivion, Direblade, Verdant. So I'm just looking if there's anything here that jumps out. All these Gargoyle Wings. Illusionist character effect. Illusionist character effect from memory is quite spectacular. Brimstone. Whole bunch of harmony effects, harmony and heritage and divergence. I think these are like all the ones I don't own from the old PoE 1 mystery box era. Vulcan Harmonious again. Electra Swarm. Electra Swarm was something more recent. Void Emperor is kind of cool. Anything Void Emperor is good. Crucible Armor set. Crucible Armor set, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that was one of the old $480 dollar supporter packs. One of the top tier ones. I actually have that one, so maybe I'll end up using the Crucible Armor set in PoE 2 at the moment. I've been using Nightfall, which isn't bad, but nothing really jumps out. And there is a smaller version of the Hands of Zesht. That is actually a big upgrade. They are quite funny, like the ugliness of them is quite funny there. So yeah, lots and lots of things there. There's so just having a quick look here at the commentary in chat. Secret of Mana is what got you into ARPGs. Yeah, Secret of Mana was a fantastic game. If people haven't played Secret of Mana, the original version of it was it was a hybrid of JRPG and ARPG, in the sense that it had this combat where you'd only ever have 3 monsters on the screen at once, but you'd be moving around a map. The monsters would move in real time with you, and combat was like at the lower levels of action based, but the game just had this phenomenal flow to it. I think I felt like it and Chrono Trigger were the best RPGs on the Super NES, and I would put Secret of Mana first. Oh, and also Final Fantasy VI, which was a classic JRPG. I would put Secret of Mana first, Final Fantasy VI second, Chrono Trigger third, but a lot of people would flip that order on its head. Whatever the case, they were all classic games, and they definitely got me interested in the RPG genre in general. And then from that, it was pretty logical step to try out Diablo, and then Diablo 2, and then I was disappointed with Diablo 3 because it had the pay-to-cheat auction house when it started. So instead of all my hype for Diablo 3 got transferred over to this new upstart game called Path of Exile, and that's where we are now. So Secret of Evermore was another one, yeah. That was another game from that era that was quite good. I felt like I would have liked Secret of Evermore more if it had more playable characters, but it was a really, really good. I definitely preferred Secret of Mana to Senken Densetsu 3. I did play Senken Densetsu 3. I felt like Senken Densetsu 3 had which is the sequel to it, because Secret of Mana in Japan was called Senken Densetsu 2. The issue that I found was actually one of the things I didn't like about Diablo 4 was that the world leveled up with you. So you had this section where you're like running around doing all of these objectives, and you would get a character power gain, but the monsters would get a larger one all the time. And I just felt like it. Yeah. Anyways, I didn't like that all that much, but it was a cool game. But they were both really, really good. And Pollux in chat is like pointing out how the sanctioned RMT in Diablo 3 was basically your part-time job when you were at school. That's kind of funny. But yeah, I wasn't that just killed my interest in the game. So many good things from that era. And how did I end up playing all those great games and skip owning the original PlayStation? I'm trying to think on that. Because PlayStation had FF7, a whole bunch of other things. I feel like there was more of a like loyalty to a specific brand back then. I was very much Nintendo loyal. The way there's this stereotype that people that have an iPhone are really loyal to Apple, and I feel like that gets overstated a bit, but there's this subset of Apple users that have this idea of like, I'm really loyal to the Apple brand and Apple products and the like. I feel like that was much more common in the 90s. And so I was very much like, as a kid, I was very much like Nintendo great, Sega terrible, and Sony not so great, like not as bad as Sega, but not great either. And I don't know why this tribalism was so strong, but it was much more so than anything in gaming nowadays. Even like the whole console PC divide, it's not nearly as bitter as it was back then. Anyways, that was probably the sort of thing that comes to mind there. I feel like, yeah, that's kind of everything in here. Let's do a quick sum up of the most significant things. Firstly, I guess there's a section that they haven't done yet, which is that Una's songs wasn't working. That's a harder fix than they thought. Multiple respawns to other Pinnacle content is not active yet. So I thought the King and the Miss would be the easiest of these. Olroth would be the hardest. But the Arbiter is the only one that they've done so far. And unfortunately, the Waystone tab is not in yet. I don't know what's happened to Peter Heath's comment there, if it's been eaten by chat as well. You'd think that like someone that's a channel member, you'd think that... there it is. Yeah, it's whatever the case, it's sort of all the way that this thing, all the way that the chat just buggy. Anyways, that's enough of that. I think we're pretty much finished here, aren't we? Are there any comments, questions that have come up before we wind up and I go and have lunch? Your Halfling raised an interesting point that there's a quest that points you towards the Arbiter way before you can get there. I still think the Arbiter is by far the hardest of them to access. And I feel it may have just been that the Arbiter was the one that felt like it had the most unfair mechanics. Like, not unfair, but the most punishing mechanics. Yeah, Meltpan, that's really interesting. So you can see it, and all I can see, it's showing up as message retracted. I don't think that the Waystone tab is going to be easy to implement at all. I think it's one of those things. Okay, here's the reason a Waystone tab is so difficult, right? You got to allow it to apply currency orbs while the maps are in there, but at the same time, it then has to be able to deal with the corner cases of what happens when you Val a map while it's in there. So in PoE 1, you can apply like chisels, elks, and the like to maps, and all of them leave the map the same, except then you Val it, and sometimes it changes to a +1 tier or whatever. That sort of thing can happen here. So what happens if your stash tab for tier 7 Waystones is full? You Val a tier 8, and it downgrades to a tier 7. That's the sort of messy thing. Melbania asks an interesting question. How do I feel about 1% increased life per level up? I think I mentioned earlier in the stream that one thing that you could consider doing is having it so that the amount of life that you gain per level is 12 during the campaign. I think it is 12. It's 12 in PoE 1. It's 12 per level during the campaign, and then it's higher at Endgame. I'm not 100% certain there. Yes, Jigsy Winky, the ultimatum mod that you're talking about was turned off. So the monsters have a large amount of energy shield, was basically giving way too much, way more than intended. So they turned it off, and then they reworked it. So the intention, at least, is that, yes, that mod is available to choose, and that it's a substantial but not an overwhelming amount of ES. Previously, it was just overwhelming. Do I feel like the Arbiter will stay the Pinnacle boss forever? No. I'm surprised the Arbiter of Ash is, like, I felt like before, the way they were hyping up the Pinnacle boss before the game launched, I thought it was going to be a significant lore figure. Whereas it kind of feels like the Arbiter of Ash is just, like, for those of you that follow PoE 1 lore significantly, the Cleansing Flame is the boss of the Searing Exarch and the Black Star. And it feels like the Arbiter of Ash is probably just another minion of the Cleansing Flame. So I was expecting Zana. I really was expecting Zana, who, again, like, only makes sense if you're a long-term PoE 1 player now. Zana's been around. Zana disappeared a long time ago, but in the story of PoE 1, she was the daughter of the Shaper, who, like, originally when the Shaper was added, it was just this mysterious architect behind the scenes. Seemed malicious, but you couldn't work out what was going on with him. And you team up with his daughter, who's exploring to find out what's going on. And then eventually you find out more about this lore when the Elder gets introduced, this extraplanar horror that starts consuming everything. And the Shaper helps you fight the Elder, but then ends up getting mind controlled by him in the final fight. And then you end up having to fight both of them at once. So that was the Uber Elder encounter. Then later on, they changed it so that was like your characters did this from patch 3.2 through 3.8 in Path of Exile 1. Then in 3.9, they retconned it so that the Elder Slayers were not your past characters. They were just a bunch of other people. And Cirrus was one of them. Cirrus was their leader. And he ended up in a relationship with Zana in it. And Cirrus was trying to fight against... he'd won the fight against the Elder, but he just went mad afterwards. There's a whole bunch of PoE 1 lore related to that. But he then just goes berserk, goes into a city and just starts destroying it and killing everyone that he can see. And he's doing this because he's just become utterly nihilistic. And this breaks Zana. Like, this makes Zana hate everything that she's had to do with the Atlas and trying to save the world. And I always thought that they were building her up to be this ultimate antagonist. And then ultimately they just went, oh no, here's a new Searing Exarch-like monster. So yeah. And it'll be interesting to see what they add in the future. I feel like everything they add will be itemized. Honestly, Here's one thing I would like to see. If they were going to add more things in, it would be to add itemized unique maps that just drop from random monsters that are bosses. I also think this could be good in PoE 1 as well. And then you could have more common ones that are easier bosses and that are just like, can be something a bit earlier in progression. And then you can have ones that are aimed more at the pinnacle of endgame content that are just that bit harder to get. So people are suspecting that Zana might be being saved for Acts 4, 5, and 6. That's possible too. I guess we shall see on that. But yeah, Cirrus is a really tragic story because the reason that he went crazy was that in the period where he's just succeeded, he's just delivered the killing blow to the Elder, and he's managed to excise it from the world forever. There's some sort of magical backlash, and he gets trapped in this thing where it looks like he is in stasis. So Zana just assumes that he's dead and says her goodbyes and starts to mourn. But he is in ultra slow-mo, and he experiences literally tens of thousands of years of subjective time in this short period of time. Then he watches Zana walk away from him. Zana's mourning him for dead. And so he thinks he's been betrayed. And at the same time, Zana thinks he's dead. So it's just this like tragic thing that ends up happening, and then Zana just washes her hands of Oriath after that. Oh, not just Oriath, of Rayclast in general. Okay, well, anyways, that's going to be the end of this stream. If people tuned in early and want to people tuned in late and you want to catch any of the earlier parts, it'll just go up as a regular video shortly, or at least that's the way that YouTube tends to run things. You don't need to close it or anything like that. You can just simply rewind, go back to previous parts. If you prefer to watch it at a faster speed, you can do that. Otherwise, I think I'm going to leave it there. May your Valorbs have interesting results, and I will see you all around. Yeah, you tuned in late, Tarek. Oops. That's all right. You can always rewind, like I said.